order for Tuesday, April 8th. Beginning the whole meeting for Chambersburg Area School District Board of Directors. Would you please join me and rise and donate to the pledge of allegiance and moment of silence. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Prior to this evening's meeting, the Board of Directors met in executive session to discuss personnel matters. And following tonight's session, we will return to executive session and continue our work. So with that, 3.01 Superintendent's Report. Mr. Bigger.
Thank you, Mr. Norcross. I just shrunk my seat, so I feel small. My last name is Bigger. It's not working for me.
You got the trick chair.
I do, but I'll do it anyway. We did receive some formal federal communications over the last couple weeks from the U.S. Department of Education, and it's currently being reviewed by Pennsylvania, and we're waiting for our local solicitor in Pennsylvania to provide guidance. The three areas we received communication around include federal civil rights, issued to us on April 3rd on state certification that we're following certain rules. We received another communication on March 28th about ESSER's funds and making sure we've spent them. There are currently extensions out there for folks, and they're at risk if they've extended beyond the original date. Fortunately for us, we've expended all the monies on the date and prior to. So that one won't apply to us. The third one was a letter dated March 31st about Title I funds for schools and schools' choice. So I'm not going to go into great detail, but I did receive my first official communication regarding that. We're waiting for final guidance from Pennsylvania and our local solicitor to make recommendations on what we should or should not do on signing anything to follow at the U.S. Department of Education. In the state budget and state impact in Chambersburg, I do want to give a lot of credit to Pennsylvania in general for the adequacy gap funds. Most people aren't connecting the dots, but when the state Supreme Court said our funding formula is illegal and outdated, the solution was to create the adequacy gap funding. For Chambersburg, if you remember my second presentation, that was $8.2 million in new state money for us. That does not mean every school in Pennsylvania received that. So the more need you have, the poorer you are, the more difficulties you have in educating students, basically the more money you received. So there are about 160 school districts in Pennsylvania who receive no adequacy gap funds. So they're certainly complaining now to the state, wanting their fair share. But the adequacy gap money for Chambersburg at $8.2 million and a proposed $5 more million for next year has been substantial in our thinking about updating our schools, providing a better education, providing options for career tech, more interventions for struggling students. I could not be more proud of Pennsylvania for providing that to Chambersburg. It's making a difference in the lives of kids, and it's not a small dollar figure. Also, we're able to potentially deliver on our grade configurations. That's why we have PFM here and our architects to continue with the grade reconfigurations on our building facilities. And the best part, certainly the community would like to hear, is it will impact less our local tax dollars. There is no way we would even consider taking on a challenge like we're considering with local property tax dollars only. Without this money, we wouldn't even consider it. We would be looking at Cam South renovations only, and that's it. But because of these state dollars, the impact to Chambersburg is significant, it is impactful, and it will change lives for students. And I'm excited about being a part of that. And I do want to thank the state because they never get thanked. I'm not sure I've thanked them too many times in my 27-year career. So there's a first time for everything, so thank you to the state for those monies. Other areas of the state budget are in discussion are around basic education funding, which would be additional money if we were to receive any, and also special education funding if we were to receive any. Also, we're hearing the PCCD safety money is pretty solid, and we'll continue to get the safety money, which again has helped us across the district improve the safety of our schools. The one area that they're still debating and is a heavy discussion, a little bit from our meeting last time, is cyber school reform, cyber charter reform. So they are still discussing that law, trying to flatline the cost for cyber schools across the state at that $10,000 range number, which would be another $1 million in savings potentially for Chambersburg. So thank you again, state. Appreciate the budget work and also the impact to Chambersburg. We still locally here continue to work through 2 negotiations with our support staff and teachers. So we hope to have agreements here before June 30th for board approval to keep us competitive, increase our recruitment efforts, and retainment of employees. Last but not least, we had a first public forum related to the calendar, was last Tuesday. 37 people approximately attended. A third of them have watched the video or looked at the calendar before attending. We will have 2 more forums. One is scheduled for next Tuesday at Cassius at 6 p.m., April 15th, and the last one, April 29th, in the boardroom. There is a Q&A on the informational section of the agenda, along with the video and the calendars from the first session for those who want to watch that prior to coming to the next public forum. Last but not least, I have 2 more topics. In my career here in Chambersburg and other places, I will say there are 2 things that have worked in scenarios for school improvements. One is collaboration time, whether it's collaboration with teachers, collaboration with administrators, collaboration with you, the board, and collaboration with the public. If we do that, we succeed. And the second is if we focus on the classroom. If you combine those 2, I've seen results every single time. So collaboration, focus on students, we will get results regardless of the strategies we're working on in the district. The last item I have, I attended a session about accountability, and it really struck me from a board level view. There's 2 types of accountability, one to prevent and one to improve. The prevention is a policy that we put in place that says, hey, let's make sure our teachers are certified. Let's make sure they do the mandatory training. Let's make sure that they are properly trained and onboarded before they start teaching. And we do a lot to prevent problems, but we don't do a lot to encourage solutions. So the second area of accountability is around innovation, change, taking calculated risks, and being creative. And I do want to thank the board for encouraging me and our school district to be a little more creative, to be innovative, and to take some calculated risks. We're really good at the mandatory policy ones, and they feel good by saying, hey, we're going to have this policy and it's going to fix everything. But the latter one and the innovative one is something we don't encourage enough. So I know my team, and our district is working to encourage more creativity, more innovation, and more calculated risk for the school board and the school district. So I know that was a little more than my usual, but thank you for that. That ends my report.
Board members, any questions for Chris? Okay, I'm going to be short tonight. Talk a little bit about upcoming PSSAs, right? We're all going to be going on Easter break here pretty soon, and you're going to come back from Easter break, and voila, it's in the PSSA. So I know the staff and the students have been really in go mode for about the past 2 months or so, preparing for this. It's a year-long endeavor, but I think you really step it up, Mr. Woodman, after Christmas. It steps up a little bit more intense. And we had snow days, which isn't a good thing for us. And it doesn't matter how many days of school we put on at the end of the year, because we take the PSSAs at the end of April. So May is just a different type of learning or something. So with that, just appreciate everyone. Keep working hard. Enjoy your Easter break, and good luck to everyone on the PSSAs. Item 4.01, proposed final budget. Mrs. Stauffer.
Thank you. To learn the technology. Okay, thank you. Good evening. Diana was so kind, she put a stand up here so I don't have to work multiple hands at the same time and try to get things moving. So for tonight, we're going to present to you our 25-26 proposed final budget. I do want to just remind the board that this is just the proposed final. We will see some changes in numbers prior to the final being brought forward for vote in June. So in looking at this slide, I'm sorry, I'm going to be taking my glasses on and off. Chris said we need to start with what we're going to end with. So in a general summary, when we're looking at the 25-26 proposed budget, we have a total revenue of just a little over $209 million. This is a milestone in that we've broke the $200 million mark. And our total expenditures will be $212 million. We are forecasting a deficit, just a little over 1% of 2.9. That will leave us with a fund balance at the end, an assigned fund balance of a little over $20 million. I do want to point out to the board that we had multiple interfund transfers currently this year, and you see that represented in the left-hand column, where we transferred $3.5 million to healthcare, $4 million to our cap reserve, and $4 million to our future debt service. And we do anticipate additional interfund transfers prior to the end of this fiscal year. Oops, okay. So what went into the expenditures? You guys most of you have heard me present before. We normally start with our expense side. Projected pay increases for all positions, including the new positions that were board approved a couple of months ago, is about $4 million. We're looking at projected benefit increase of a little over $3 million. We've also built into this budget some additional positions that were not yet board approved. One is an FTE for special education, and this is a result of the recent audit that special ed went through. The athletic program is in need of a few coaching positions, an assistant golf, a head and assistant cheerleading, and a head and assistant girls wrestling coach for an estimated $56,000. Looking at adding a third NJROTC instructor, we're estimating that that's going to be cost neutral due to expanding the program in the county and also the federal dollars that we receive to offset that program. And additionally, we have eliminated 2 administrative FTEs. This is due to the grade reconfigurations that are going to be happening and also some of the programmatic realignment that Mr. Bigger has done. So some big hitters. This budget does include the 1% tax resolution that we have voted on a couple years ago. That transfer for 25-26 would be $4.5 million. And we've also included additional debt service in an attempt to build up the debt service fund for that future debt that we're going to incur. And you're going to hear Mr. Fry talk about that a little bit later on. So we have a line item of $5.5 million. Again, additional debt service. It will be money going into the debt service fund. There were some inflational and contractual increases. That's just about $3.8 million. And then additional programming needs of just under $400,000. I did want to point out to the board, I don't normally include this in the general fund budget presentation, but we have in our assigned fund balance earmarked money for curriculum, technology, and instruction. And so Mr. Widman and Dr. Long have identified a few things that they would like to be able to expend dollars on that will come out of the assigned fund balance next year. And you can see that breakdown as it's listed there. The total is $1.83 million that will be coming out of that assigned fund balance. Okay, so for revenue sources, for the purpose of this budget, just a reminder, our Act 1 adjusted index is 5.3%. I was asked to build a 2% tax increase budget that will generate just about $3.2 million in additional real estate taxes. We do have a 1% growth in the assessment base forecasted. We are not quite there yet. We monitor that monthly, and it looks like it's going to hit that level. 98% collection rate. We're looking at the mill rate for this year to be 135.1428. And of course, you can see the value of the mill and the value of the collected mill. So total real estate taxes collected would be $88 million. And this, of course, does take in effect the EIT money that we use to offset the homestead farmstead exclusion. Looking at the additional revenue from the local sources, just pointing out right now, I'm not going to go through lines 1 through 5, but line 6, right now we do have a forecast from earned income tax of $24,500,000. That's what is in today's budget.
I'm comfortable with that. I'm hopeful that the economy is not going to go too wonky here, if that's a good word to use, but things are a little unstable. Normally when, if the economy starts to recede and people start to lose jobs, that's the number that we start to have trouble hitting. So we're going to monitor that as we go throughout the rest of the summer. So local sources in total, around 122 million. I can't talk tonight, 122 million. Okay. Moving on, looking at the state sources, just going to highlight here what Mr. Bigger said. The governor's budget does have an additional $5 million built into the adequacy, and you can see that in number 4, which is the Ready to Learn block grant. We have included that in this budget projection. That's a little bit out of character. Normally, the last 2 years, we've been more conservative and said, we're never going to get that kind of money because we've never had it before. So we're a little more confident that it's going to come this year than we have been in the past. So state sources are just under 74 million. Federal sources, they don't change a whole lot. Of course, this doesn't take into consideration anything that may come down the pike. Right now, as Mr. Bigger said, we're kind of getting notices coming out, but it's pretty much been status quo. The big change on the federal sources is we did receive the BSCA grant. I'm going to look at Kirk because I can't remember what it stands for. Yeah. So we've built that into the line item. So our federal sources are up just slightly to around $6 million. Okay. So just kind of reflecting on where we landed, if you recall, last month we had Mr. Kevin Stout, for no relation to me, just full disclosure on that, we're not related, come in and do the financial audit. I just wanted to give the board a reminder of where our fund balances are currently sitting. If you look at the non-spendable and the restricted, you can kind of just put those on the side because they are exactly what they say. You can't really use them for anything other than what they're intended for, so they're not really discretionary in terms of how we can spend them. The committed fund balance, I wanted to spend a little bit of time on that. At the end of fiscal year 24, the committed fund balance was over $9 million. That is money that is earmarked for future taxpayer relief. And how that gets into that committed balance is when we collect more earned income tax than we budget. And under Act 1, there's a percentage that has to be used for future taxpayer relief. So we haven't pushed that out. We put it in a committed fund balance and we use it for future. If you recall from last year's budget presentation, our homestead farmstead exclusion was over $900. We upped it by $100 by using the committed fund balance, and we'll continue to do that to kind of get that built down. It'll also help us in those years where we've budgeted more earned income tax and we don't collect it, because in that case, we've already pushed it out to the taxpayers, but we didn't bring the revenue in. The assigned, again, this was sitting as of the end of 2024, had just under 40 million. Total general funds, you can see, were just under 53 million. Cap reserve, very happy and proud of this. We had a 10 million, almost $11 million. We do have the Capital Projects Fund, which was the bond that we issued in anticipation of doing CAM South, sitting at just around $8 million. And then the Special Revenue Fund, currently at the end of 2024, was sitting at $205,000. So total funds were just under $72 million. Okay, so again, just as a reminder, we're looking at a revenue of $209 million, expenditures $212, with an anticipated deficit of around 2.9. And again, we're looking at the ending assigned fund balance being around 21 million. So give you an idea of what the tax increases could be, just from a discussion standpoint. We can show you the ranges there between 0%. Because of the growth of the base, we will generate revenue just because the base is growing. More people are paying taxes. The high ends up at the 5.3 at just around 6.5 million. And again, we are estimating a 2% right now, so just around 3.2 million. These are the corresponding deficits, and you can see that we project a deficit until you get to about 4.5%. And with that amount of tax increase, we would be presenting a zero balance budget. So I'm not going to spend some time on these unless you really want me to. I've done this in the past, but they're there more for your understanding. Just one thing to note is that we are starting to see just a slight shift between the local and state, and that's because of the additional money that we've received the last couple of years. So this slides will just provide to you a breakdown of the major funds, and it could give you a comparison year over year. And then we show expenditures by major objects. Again, just pointing out that the majority of our budget is wrapped up in people. So either salaries and benefits or contracted services, 82% of that is represented by people. And then also just to kind of highlight here, this is the major functions of our expenditures, and you can see 61% goes towards instruction. And under the support services, where it says 25%, again, I'll just point out that is not just administration. That includes transportation, technology, nurses, counselors. So a lot of those services go directly towards our students. So where are we? We're here today on April 8th presenting. We will bring forward an item on the 22nd board meeting that will be for you to approve a proposed final budget. We'll then put the budget on display, advertise our intent to adopt. On May 1st, we received notification from the state of Pennsylvania about the amount of gaming money that they're going to provide for us for our homestead farmstead. We also received from the county at that time the homestead farmsteads that have been approved. So then Danette and I do some crunching of numbers and come up with a number that we can present for the final budget approval in June. Any questions? I know I went through that pretty quickly.
On the, where we at here, project, sorry. I'm sorry, I'm trying to find the slide that it was on. Anybody else has something, go ahead.
Yeah, I've got a comment, give you a little more time. Yeah, I just want to commend the administration. I often hear people talking about, well, the administrative staff is just way overweight. There's too many administrators and not enough teachers. Well, I just heard you say we cut 2 administrators. Mm-hmm. And we're putting those assets toward teachers where they're really going to matter with the students. So I say I commend the decision to do that, and thank you very much.
On the capital reserve and the capital projects.
So what slide number are we on?
I'm sorry, is that slide number 10?
On the fund balances?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Does that come back to what we did with the +1?
The +1 has definitely impacted the cap reserve. It did. That's where that money is going. The capital projects, like I mentioned, was a bond that we issued. I believe it was in 23. Thank you, John. And that was in anticipation that we were going to move forward with one of the CAMS projects. So that money's sitting in there, and we can use that towards whatever we do with the grade reconfigurations.
And that gave us a better situation on the loan.
Well, it will.
Well,
I mean,
yeah.
it will help our credit rating.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that when we issue a bond, we'll go through and they look at a lot of numbers, and John might be able to speak about it a little bit better than me, but they definitely look at your fund balances and they look at the trends of whether you're going up or down, and it impacts your credit rating, which will impact the rate that you get on the borrowing. You know, just, and you all have probably heard me say this before, when I started in this position in 2018, the cap reserve had $900,000 in it, and it was one of those things that would keep me up at night because you have so many facilities to maintain. And so I thought that was my timer. It's like, okay.
Chicken's done.
Chicken's done. Oh, boy, okay. So a few years ago, when the board put that resolution forward, we've been pushing money into the cap reserve. And of course, coming out of COVID, you know, we did have some surpluses. We've tried to move money into the cap reserve and also into healthcare to offset some of those ongoing expenses.
Well, to that, I wanted to say kudos to the board who was here before, and to Ed Norcross for actually bringing that up, that +1, because I realized 3 years ago, with the position that it's put us in today, and the decision that we made back then has, put us in a much better position today, so.
Yeah, Mr. Baker and I have spoken, we need to have a line item transfer for the cap reserve into the general operating budget every year. It's healthy to be able to do that in order to maintain your facilities. You're going to hear, Mr. Varner is going to present here a little bit later on about a plan and how do we bridge that gap till we get to this golden year called 2037 when the debt falls off. But most organizations, at least my experience outside of education, you have a line item in there going over to your cap reserve. You need a way to fund it. And so the +1 has allowed us to do that. And we have that on the agenda a little bit later on to talk about, right now it's accumulating. At some point you're going to say, okay, what's the magic number? Do we get to $4 million a year and have that reoccurring and that's enough going into the cap reserve? Or do we continue to bump it up by that 1%? So that's another discussion that we're going to have.
And I wonder if you might elaborate just a bit. So where does that money come from that goes into that 1+ fund?
So the +1 is basically saying if, say, we do a 2% tax increase, 1% of that is going over to the capital reserve. That's where that money comes from. So it's basically coming from the local tax revenue.
Right, and we're going to discuss that specifically at a few more items down, right?
Yes,
So I'll
correct.
hold any comment till then.
Okay. Yeah.
I think I know the answer to this, but
Okay.
I'm going to ask because I like to ask for clarification. You know me by
I
now.
know, that's awesome.
So if you do the 2%, then we would be at the $2.9 million deficit. If we decide that we're not going to raise it any higher than that, where does it come from to balance that budget?
Well, it'll come out of the fund balance. So it'll come out of the assigned fund balance. And again, I do want to point out, like, these numbers are going to change. Like, the numbers you're going to see in June are going to look a little bit differently because we know some things are going to come out between now and then. It's April 8th. We have 2 months to go before. I doubt we'll have anything from the state. I think you're hearing it might be pushed past the July 1st. So it would come out of that savings count, so to speak, is how I like people to refer to the fund balances as.
That's what I thought, but I just wanted to
Yeah.
double check. Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
What's the rationale for not going higher than 2% and trying to get that number down?
Oh, you want me to take that one?
No, I'll take it. I'll take it.
I'll take it.
Go ahead.
Well, because I was going to be my question, one of my questions or my comments. If you want to go back to that slide, Tammy, that'd probably be best for everyone.
I think it's 13.
Okay, I'm going the wrong way then.
Historically, and spoiler alert, I am conservative if you didn't know, but historically, we've been very conservative with this chart. And I applaud the staff for that because I think that's the way you should budget. I don't believe in budgeting right to the nth degree because that's how you get in trouble. Like some of our neighboring districts are now in big trouble. I won't mention any names. But we've historically beat this. And I think every year we have beat this. So Ms. Harbaugh was a great question, and it gives you pause when you see a number in red, darn near 3 million. It does give you pause. But if we put last year's slide up here like that, it was very similar.
It was.
And at the end of the year, of course, the net, I know it's not audited yet, but if we go back,
It's nowhere near the audit yet.
if we go back a year and a half and you look at the budget from that time frame, well, and with the audited results, we beat it, and we beat it by a bunch. So I just, keep that in line, and then, Mr. Haydick, we are gonna talk about it shortly, but the +1, the way, and Mr. Leonard was a big help with this also, finance was his forte. But the +1 that we enacted was really, and it was +1, we would look at this as our operating. And then the +1, and often I've said +X, because it doesn't have to be 1. And if you look at Mr. Fry's presentation, it looks like it's higher than +1, I think, right? But it's +X that then it is in addition to, if you look at this as operating, the cost of doing business the way we always do. with just the cost of living, just normal cost increases. The +1 is the extra. At the time, it went to capital projects, but the plan was eventually it would come to debt service, because back at that time, if you remember, we were looking at 2 projects in the neighborhood of $35–40 million apiece. So we were trying to get enough money banked to have an $8 million borrowing program, $80 million borrowing program. Now we're double that.
Yeah, that's a good point, Mr. Norcross. And he's true, I'm very conservative. I get a little bit of flack on that every once in a while, but that's the relationship, I guess, between superintendents and business manager. The thing that I would point out about this budget, and I do think we probably will not have a deficit, but we're forecasting every position being filled from day one. We're fully staffed. All of that goes into play. The only thing that is different with this year is I am including the governor's proposed dollars, that $5 million. If I didn't, you'd be seeing a much bigger deficit. But again, like I said, we're much more confident than we've been in the past couple of years just because of what we've seen. Of course, if we don't get that $5 million, then we may have to back off of how much we put into the cap reserve or how much we put into additional debt service. So we've got a little wiggle room on some lines there, if that makes sense.
What are the 2 big cost drivers that were projecting larger increases maybe than we wanted? So like healthcare, I think was one.
Healthcare it's not good. I'm just going to say that. During our Act 1 meeting that we met with our consultant, he was projecting around a 20% 20% increase. We just met a week ago, and it's now at 24.2% of an increase year over year. We've had significant high claims, and we are seeing our pharmacies' drugs go up. A lot of it is the weight loss drugs, is driving that. So, we're kind of looking at some things that we can do with that program. So that's one of big cost drivers. The other one is charter schools. We're going to come probably next month or maybe probably in May with a request to move money out of the budgetary reserve to pay the charter school bills through the end of the year. So I think we put $1.5 million more, I'm looking at Danette, for cyber charters into this budget. And special ed. I mean, we are still seeing significant increases in special ed. Used to be we talked about PSERS. PSERS is killing us. Skeezers is killing us. Now it's these 3 components are probably the biggest ones. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So is there a way to build this out a little bit more? You're anticipating this changing. Is there a way to build those, hey, we anticipate this being, this number that we're being presented with right now of $3 million, you're expecting that to come to be 0 or something close to that come May or,
It won't be 0. When I referred to it being 0, it would be when we end of the year.
So you mean once the year?
June of
so you're-
26. June
Yeah.
of 26.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Fiscal
okay.
year end.
yeah.
So you're saying you'll find savings of $3 million over the course of, maybe
I'll
find
rephrase
savings
that.
there's a better way to say it.
Yeah, her worst case scenario planning doesn't come true.
Yes.
She plans the worst case scenario that we'll see another $4 million in healthcare increases, another 1.5 in cyber costs, and that may not be exactly
Yeah.
true, but she has to plan for it as if it would.
Yeah. The
That
other,
makes sense.
the big area too is really our, our attrition rates. So when we do the budget, I'm looking at who's sitting in what position today. I don't move that as we move out throughout the year. So I don't know who's going to retire, who's going to come in at a lesser cost. I don't know how many positions are going to remain open for 2 months, 4 months, half a year, or not be filled at all. So when we forecast, they're in there 100%. They're here from day one. So there will be some attritional savings. Yeah.
I just want to say that I too appreciate the experience of board members who have been here many, many years before I arrived, and their sense of conservatism. I'm probably less conservative, but I reflect on how I live my life and my finances, and I realize there's a bit of goodness in every conservative decision you make. But I also fall back on something that Mr. Bigger said almost on day one. He says, it's not how much money we're asking for, it's how we use the money we get. And I'm convinced that everything that this superintendent has done thus far has always considered the costs, the value of those decisions, and what's right for the kids. So I'm comfortable that he's found a way to balance those two ideas at the same time. So thank you very much for the experienced folks and for the administrators who are doing the great job they're doing now.
Another question I had, what's the rationale for taking on more debt rather than trying to address a percentage of that through, right now I think, as is, we're leaving 3.3 million or something like that on the table. Why not reduce the amount of debt that you're taking on and try to cover more of that on the front end? I mean, you could do it a variety of ways, but.
Are you asking me why not raise the tax rate, bring more money in?
If you're at 3%, that'd be another $1 million that you wouldn't need to take on as debt, right?
Yeah,
And every year after.
I think
So,
let John Fry from PFM talk about bonds, rates, interest rates, influence you a little bit. I think also we can't say, in my mind,
Right.
get $8 million from the state, maybe another 5, and on top of that, go to the taxpayers for continued. At some point, those state dollars are to help not tax the local folks.
right.
And that's the justification on why the two, you won't see me unless we're in dire crisis, go above a 2 or a 3. Unless we have some substantial, absolute need that we cannot cover with our current programming. And that's, so that you're not gonna see me bring a budget at above 2 or 3. Last year was 3, I think, and we had the +1. This year it's 2 with the +1. And that's mainly.
Plus X.
Plus X, yeah.
John's not done yet.
Yeah, that's correct. And so that's because the state is continuing to be more confident on that adequacy gap funding. I mean, I don't want to get people excited, but so far, if you remember the public forums when I said I don't like to overpromise and underdeliver, it's the first time in my career I had to have a plan for the district in case we would receive additional state money. And so far, many of those plans are coming to fruition because we are receiving the state money. The adequacy gap funding is projected for 7 years to catch us up. So those communities who could afford and got basic ed money, basically, they're not getting adequacy gap funding. They're going to their local tax dollars or payers. We don't have to as much. So if the promise of 7 years happens with 8.2 and 5, and even if it goes down slowly over time, it's still 7 years of significant dollars. So I don't feel comfortable going down that road. Now, if we weren't getting state money and we wanted to build the buildings, we wouldn't have much of a choice.
Yeah, and I'll follow up with that, and then another comment back on this on just the operating side. But the 2% does not include the plus X. So don't forget that when you're looking at this chart.
No, it does, Ed, I'm sorry.
It does.
Yeah, if
Oh, it
you,
does include?
it does.
It's built in.
Yeah, I built it in. Well, let me see where I'm at
So
here.
it's a 1% plus a 1%.
It is.
Yes, so if you look at the capital reserve transfer, the 4.5 million, that's the cumulated
Okay.
1%. So we put it in as a line item.
Okay.
Again, it's proposed preliminary, so.
Right.
Then back to that slide, that helps my next question, or I'll talk about recent history instead of 10 or 12 years of history. Last year, when we looked at this slide, it looked similar.
Yeah.
And it was based on not receiving any additional state funding.
Correct.
And then we ended up with
Right.
4 million?
8.
8 million.
We ended up with 8 million additional dollars. Again, 12 months from today, go back 12 months. This was negative. We ended up with 8 million additional dollars. And we're figuring another 5
5.
million additional dollars and an additional 1% in just operating.
Well, right, and honestly,
And let me
go ahead, I'm sorry.
finish. So if you go back to that slide, my concern is here, a tax and spend philosophy, okay? We have eaten up $8 million of last year's money, $5 million of this year's money, and 1%, and we're still at an annual, a proposed annual, conservative annual deficit. So we're eating up money, revenue, pretty quickly. So let's be careful with tax and spend, and everything we do then implies, you know. So basically, we're spending 13 million more dollars this year, and we're still negative, year over year, 12
Yes.
months.
But let me point out, two of the big drivers of that are, let me get back here. This slide is, I'm putting almost $10 million going into cap reserve, which I didn't have that last year, and the debt service is going to go up by what we need to pay by 5.5. Again, building up that debt service fund. Both of those lines, and I'm going to say this, if we don't build the buildings, you probably don't need either of those lines in your budget. But 10 million of that 13 million that you're pointing out is those two lines.
But
And then
that
healthcare's.
future debt service has been captured with 3 years of +1.
No, the +1 is going into the cap reserve. I'm trying to think, I'm looking at Danette. Normally what we've done the last few years with debt service is when we've done bond refundings, we would flatline the debt service as if we didn't. And then we'd take that difference and we'd move it to cap reserve. That's one of the ways that we help to build that up.
And excess would go into cap.
Correct.
At the end of the year, once it's audited, then we would move excess into
Yep.
cap reserve.
Exactly, what we felt we could do. So in the 25-26 budget, what we've done is we've put what we know the 25-26 debt service is going to be, and I don't know the number off the top of my head. I'm going to say it's around 11 or 12 million, looking at Danette. We've added 5.5 million so that we're ramping up for those future bond payments, and you're going to see John present that in a little bit. Additionally, what we're doing is until we get to those outer years, I don't want to steal his thunder, if we keep that 5.5 in there and we continue to ramp it up to get to the level that we need to do, and I think it's year 2030, 28, somewhere in around there, we will have a debt service line that can support the borrowings. So those are two big variables that have been built in, that we made choices, talking with Mr. Bigger, this is how we feel we need to get to being able to borrow $200+ million and afford it without having to do that. You can't sustain, a budget can't sustain bumping up debt service by $12 million in 1 year or 2 years or 3 years. It just can't do it. So. Any other questions?
Thank you, Mrs. Stauffer.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm going to leave all this one for you.
All right, Mr. Fry.
All right.
We've set you up a couple times now.
Yeah, sounds like it. Appreciate it. Nice to see everybody again. So just as a recap, a short presentation tonight. I know you have some kind of probably more interesting topics right after me on the projects themselves, but wanted to give you another overview. I know I was here last June and again last November to kind of keep talking about bond issues with the board as you can contemplate your projects. And so that's what I'm really trying to do tonight, another recap and try to look forward a little bit. So just briefly on the page 2 on interest rates. Certainly, anybody following the news in the last week, the volatility has been, something that's pretty much unheard of over the last couple decades. The interest rate chart I have on the bottom here, I think I did last week. Since then, it's just gone up 20 basis points and then, down 20 basis points. In the last 2 days, it's gone up 60 basis points. Basically, every bond issue in Pennsylvania this week has been postponed. So just kind of to show you the volatility right now. Yeah. But I don't expect that to continue. It's short-lived, hopefully. But the big picture for the board as you contemplate is interest rates right now, they're going to go up and down, but they're about historical averages. If you look back over the last 30 years, they're about historical averages. But we'll continue to monitor that. And again, I'll talk about this in a little bit. You don't need to worry about interest rates until we intend to borrow a small portion, call it $10 million, relatively small, later this year if the board would like to start funding some of these projects. On page 3, just a quick snapshot. This is just your debt service, just for reference. The bond issues from left to right, going back, these are your outstanding bond issues. Most of them were done for refinancings, as Mrs. Stauffer had pointed out, some for new money. And importantly, they add up to the top right blue box of about $12 million a year. And it's about $12 million until 2037. Then you can see a pretty substantial drop in that. So that's where the debt service payments would go down, giving more opportunity for affordability of future projects. The next page is one you've seen from me again in June and November, just updated. The biggest change is in the top right corner. Based on the most recent estimates, we're instead of, I think last time I was here in November, we were borrowing a net amount of $175 million. I've been advised to increase that to $200 million. Again, these will all change and be refined as we go through time and get better estimates. But again, just to try to keep moving a little bit more closer to the refined numbers. So we show 4 different steps to get up to the $200 million. Again, we can adjust the size of the steps, the timing of the steps. On the far left in column, or in the blue, we're anticipating for now, sometime this fall, obviously it's your pace, borrowing approximately $10 million to get some more money into your account so you can start paying for architects and design and you can get things moving. It also starts to lock in interest rates and diversify some interest rate risk. And then we would borrow, some pretty substantial borrowings over the next couple years in 26, 27, and 28. The biggest things to take away from this page right now are in the red. I put a yellow highlighted box. Basically, as Mrs. Stauffer said, we're basically going from, these are estimated payments to bondholders, okay? We'll get in the next page kind of how you can budget for them. But you can see they're gonna go from about $12 million to about $26 million roughly over a six-year period. So that is a substantial increase. They are starting from a low spot. If you look at the on the right-hand side in the black, if we look at it as a debt service as a percentage of your operating budget, it's low. A lot of people use 10% as kind of a threshold they like to look at. Right now you're below 6%, and you can see in a couple of the years you would be pushing a little over 10%, but it'd be short-lived. I have a graph later on to illustrate that, but short-lived above the 10%, because as your budget continues to grow, and right now this is only growing at 3%, so if things continue to move the way they've been, these will all be refined and probably grow more than 3% as your operating expenses grow. But again, just to continue to try to plan ahead, and I'll show you on the next page how perhaps, again, on a macro big picture level, how the affordability of going from 12 million to 26 million over 6 years and how that kind of equates to more of a tax increase picture.
Pardon me, John?
Yes, sir.
Would you be kind enough, I'm not familiar with the distinction between bank qualified and non-bank qualified. Could you explain that, please?
No, it's a great question. It's a small distinction, and it's a distinction when it's the tax code. So you borrow all your bonds for projects are borrowed at tax-exempt interest rates, so the investors don't have to pay interest on it. So you get a lower interest rate than, say, a corporation. Okay, but then within tax-exempt, there's a classification the IRS gives called bank qualified and non-bank qualified. And what that means is if it's below $10 million, if you borrow $10 million or less in a calendar year, local governments get what's called bank qualified, so the investors get they get a tax break, tax advantage. So basically, if you're borrowing that amount or less and they're bank qualified, you get a slightly lower interest rate, but also, and sometimes a bigger influence of trying to stick to that, is you also get a better refinancing date. So all these bonds, if you do it at bank qualified, you'd be able to refinance it in about 5 years. If you did it non-bank qualified, once you get to the bigger bond issues, the market will want more like a 7 or 8 year call. So all else being equal, if you can borrow $10 million or less, it's advantageous to do that to get a slightly improved bond issue.
Thank you.
Any other questions at this point? So page 5 is a new page to try to take where we just were. That highlighted box from the previous page is now on the top left-hand side, those same numbers, again, payments to bondholders, again, just estimates that you would owe bondholders $12 million next year, but ramp up over the next 5 or 6 years up to $26 million. And that would be, a very significant increase, right? If you were starting from 12 and going to 26. But as Mrs. Stauffer just pointed out, the good planning the administration's done and the board has done, and the advantageous position you've gotten from the state funds puts you in a position where you're already, if you budget that extra amount that you just went over, it puts you in a position in this year that the estimated dollars budgeted for debt service would be closer to $17 million. So while you owe bondholders $12 million, you're starting to set aside reoccurring revenue of $17 million. So now if you look at column 6 there, what we're trying to figure out then is how then over the next 6 years to go from that change is from 17 million to 26 million, which is much more affordable than if you're going from 12 to 26. Given the indices, the index that you're restrained to every year, which we don't know what the future of that looks like, potentially with any kind of recession that could cause that to go down. So what this chart is really aiming to do is it's not trying to show you exactly what we think is going to happen, but it's just trying to show the basic math on, if you have to go from 17 to $26 million and given a couple assumptions on the value of a mill and your millage rate and so forth, if you, in column 4, put in about 2.2 mills each year, and again, this is just a for instance, I'll be working with the administration and the budget office a lot on trying to refine this over time. But this is, again, just the math behind those bond payments. You would need tax increases or millage equivalent increases of about, column 5, 1.6% a year just for debt service.
That's the X. That's the plus X.
And so in some years, you can see what we try to do is to smooth this in. We're trying to do that kind of on a smoothed out basis so you don't have big spikes. So in column 7, you see sometimes there's years where we have a surplus, and then we use that surplus later on where there's some deficits. Okay, so we're able to smooth in these increases. Over time, I'll hopefully have some pages, as we get more into the project where you have some operational efficiencies that can help all the operations side of things. This is just the debts, just trying to figure out how to pay debt service, but we'll have more refinement later on actually, what you really need for tax increases, but this again is just to try to show the equivalent tax increase to just make those bondholder payments. And again, you wouldn't be, the position that you're in now is much better than it would be if you were starting from scratch at the 12 million. So the budget that you're looking at that has been laid out before you just a little bit ago, that extra amount that you're putting in is putting you on a better glide path to get to where you need to be. And again, I don't want, this is just a big picture. It's just a kind of a tool to help all of us kind of think about what the kind of ballpark magnitude of this looks like. But again, it'll be refined over time. And the next 2 pages are just some kind of illustrations and graphs just to show you. I think it is kind of dramatic when you just graph out what I just showed you in numbers. You can see that there is an increase for sure over the next several years. It flattens out, then there's a big drop. If we continue to borrow money on a level payment, basically like a 25-year mortgage, if you will, on all these, you can see you're still maintaining that really big drop off in 2037, which gives the school more flexibility in the future. And then finally, the last page is a new one, just a percentage. It's that graph of that far right percentage I showed you earlier, the debt service as a percentage of operating expenses. And you can see there's only about 5 years where it goes slightly over the 10%, but as your budget continues to grow, that kind of comes down nicely as far as an affordability kind of measurement. So again, I think the board's seen most of this before, but we're just trying to refine this as we go along. It'll continue to be, again, as you move forward, and I'm in touch with Mrs. Stauffer a lot, and as things progress over the summer, if you would like, we could be in a position to borrow some money later this fall to continue on the process of getting the money you need for your project. But happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Mr. Fry?
Great. All right, good.
Thank you.
I have one, Mr.
Thank you.
Fry, and maybe, and this would go for the board. So when you look at this, page 5, sheet 5, if fiscal year, and I'd be curious what this graph would look like if for fiscal year end 2026, there was a 1% in column 5, what that would make this look like, just for comparison purposes and future discussions. I know the 2% that we just talked about with Mrs. Stauffer is incorporated in that 5.5
Right.
million. But this is my hypothesis. If the 2% that we just talked about went to operation and we did a plus X of 1%, what would this chart look like?
I mean, I think in round numbers, correct me if I'm wrong, but the 17, because right now what I did, that, you
But
can see.
what I'm really interested in is what's the impact in column 7? That's the end.
Yeah, so I think, so you can see, I left those, the column 4 and column 5 are blank for this year because it was kind of easier to do it that way and just kind of say, from the business offers, they told me put in $17 million, and that'll change over the next month or two, depending on your budget. But if you all of a sudden you made that $18 million, right, that would go to 18 million, you'd have more of a surplus, which means you'd be able to lower and smooth things out even better. I mean, you know, it goes without saying, I think, the more you can do when you can, it makes the out years a little easier. But eventually, eventually we need to get to $26 million. It's a matter of, you know, how to phase that in.
The value of a mill is,
What value of 1%?
no, 1 mill is 900,000?
Well, kind of. I mean,
1% is 9,900.
one mill, and John and I had a long conversation about this today. It gets a little tricky because when we do the mills, it actually would generate at 135 about $106 million.
1.6.
$106 million.
Oh,
Okay. But because of us being an Act 1 school district, we then back out the portion of earned income tax that we have to offset. So we're going to collect about 88 million. So our collected mill rate is around $881,000.
For 1 mill.
Yeah.
And 1% is 1.3 mills, correct?
Sorry.
1% is like the equivalent of 1.35 mills.
I don't know. We'd have to
Yes.
calculate that. That number varies. Yeah.
So it's like 1% is about 1.2 million.
I think, yeah, that's about right.
I did want to weigh in here, if I could, just a little bit, Mr. Norcross. I think to your question, one of the things that I had done and showed Mr. Bigger is the debt service fund. Like, we already have a balance in the debt service fund. And so we are anticipating at what I did, and again, we would have to super fund debt service out through the next few years, but we would end with a balance at the end of fiscal '29 of about $17 million that could be used to offset future debt service, or we could swap out and maybe use that for an additional build or something like that. I don't know if that helps or if that makes more confusion, but.
Right, we'll be refining, you know, interest earnings that you earn on your bond proceeds, all those things will be weighed into this. And this is even showing a surplus in column 7 in the out years, which you could use for either reducing the final bond issue that is needed for the project or using for other capital. I do, as back to some of these other comments we had before, each time you do a bond issue, you have to get a credit rating, and it's much easier for all of us to get on the phone and talk to Moody's, your credit rating agency, when we're able to show them that your savings account is still healthy. And so spending your savings account now for projects and is less advantageous. You'd rather be able to show Moody's, we got the cash, we're borrowing, and then at the end of the project, you can say, now we're going to downsize our last bond issue. So that's usually, we'll try to refine that as we go along. And in this case, we're still showing surplus in that column 7.
Thank you, Mr. Fry.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
4.03, capital management, Mr. Varner.
All right, good evening. Tonight, I'll be presenting a document that outlines the district's projected capital needs from 2028 to 2037, along with a strategic plan for managing those needs while continuing to invest in major building projects. I hope this presentation provides clarity on the capital needs of our existing facilities and helps guide and inform decision-making for future investments into new facilities.
Matt, before you go too far, I want to highlight, you have a hand-drawn slide that I made from John's that basically highlights his presentation on the risk analysis. If we borrow certainly a higher amount that puts us closer to some of our debt ceilings, what's our risk? And so he's presenting on what's remaining schools are the needs. So what you don't want to do, and I've been through this enough, is spend money that have no money left to fix the schools you have. So we're risking that analysis saying, okay, can we afford to fix schools with existing dollars based on what Matt's analysis is on the risk? So that's what this chart is. Make sense? Okay.
Okay, so the first step of our process involved completing a life cycle assessment of our facilities. This was based on input from our B&G team, ASHRAE's median life expectancy data, life cycle assessment tools from the American Institute of Architects, as well as our Chambersburg Area School District building roof assessments. You'll notice the assessment does not include Buchanan, Lurgan, Guilford, Falling Springs, Grandview, Cams North, or Cams South. As we anticipate those projects, the upcoming projects will impact those facilities. So as you see in the document, across the top, we have the buildings listed, and down the side, we have the proposed capital needs. This list includes items like turf and roof replacements to full system HVAC system replacements. In gray at the bottom, this is identifying projects that have been identified as potential needs to ensure comparable facilities at the elementary level. On the right-hand side of the document, highlighted in blue, are our support buildings. We're continuing to study support and education or athletic consolidation opportunities with RLPS. While the facilities do possess some capital needs, those buildings, along with the comparable facilities projects, are not included in the upcoming budget analysis. So next, I used that life cycle analysis to project capital needs based on end of life cycle dates. This is the data that you'll see on the next 2 pages. Our goal was really to limit capital projects to about $2 million a year. I will say there is flexibility in this plan. So ASHRAE will tell you the life expectancy of a chiller, the median life expectancy of a chiller is about 22 years. That means at year 21 or 22, you should start planning for replacement. However, that might last 24 or 25 years. Maintenance practices and environmental environments affect overall equipment lifespan as well. There may also be some unexpected failures that are not accounted for on this list that could require some capital funding as well. You can see on the next page, capital needs could exceed $36 million, with approximately $32 million of that expected from 2028 to 2037. In the latter years, maintaining that $2 million a year goal gets extremely hard just because we have to anticipate HVAC replacement at the high school. Next, we'll take a look at the financial side. As you look at this chart, you can see in green, that would be deposits or transfers in. The red would be capital projects out. And then the yellow column would be total cap reserve. Current to date, we have just over $16 million in our cap reserve. We also have just over $2 million of capital projects that were approved back in the fall. That brings top right our total cap reserve currently to just over $14 million. As you can see, in the 2025-2026 year, Ms. Stauffer hit on this in her presentation. We are projecting or scheduled to deposit just over $4.5 million into the cap reserve. This is based on the 1% board resolution that we spoke an awful lot about tonight. We do understand that we cannot continue to fund the capital reserve at that level, especially as new debt service for new construction projects is being added in. So to support the $2 million annual of expenditures, this presentation proposes funding the cap reserve at $2 million per year beginning in 2027. As you can see, this approach ensures that we can meet all the projected capital needs while still maintaining a fairly healthy cap reserve. Without continued funding, the current cap reserve could be exhausted by 2033 or 2034. I will note that the interest earned on our accounts are not accounted for in these figures either. Next, I just want to kind of end. I want to highlight a few potential cost-saving opportunities that could lead to long-term sustainability for our district. You know, the first one there is reduction in administrative costs and optimized staffing. Consolidation in our elementary schools, building a new 4-5-6 and moving to 1-7-8 model will likely provide opportunity to reduce administrators and to more optimize our staff. This number has not been quantified yet, but early indications is it could be a pretty sizable number. Reduction in operation and maintenance costs. Obviously, if we reduce the number of facilities, we will reduce our operation costs. This will also, a reduction in facilities would allow us to more strategically schedule our operational folks, or our staff. Energy efficiency through cost-effective technologies. Again, new buildings are generally more efficient than older buildings, but along with the new construction projects, we're able to look at new cost-effective technologies or green technologies, you know, similar to solar or geothermal, to help with long-term utility consumption. A reduction in property costs and potential revenue through potential revenue generation through sale or lease of unused buildings. That one's pretty self-explanatory. Although no decisions have been made on the future of the consolidated facilities, there does appear that there could be you know, opportunity to generate revenue through those facilities. Long-term investment in the new schools by increased property tax. You know, investing in the new schools is investing into the community. I mean, typically new schools promote higher property values, which in turn generates additional revenue through tax collection for the school district. And lastly, I just want to highlight the Pennsylvania Facilities Improvement Grant. While there were a few grants available in 2024, this was the largest grant for school improvements. Governor Shapiro allocated about $175 million to this grant in 2024. Many of you recall PlanCon or PlanCon 2.0, which was a reimbursement program for construction of new schools, additions and renovations. While that doesn't appear to be coming back, competitive grants like this seem to be you know, the future for the state investing in school facilities. Last year, we were awarded $750,000 through this grant program, and we anticipate that this could potentially continue into the future. And the last page I have is just a little bit more information on that grant and what eligible projects there are and what the funding limits are. So that concludes my presentation tonight. I would be happy to answer any questions.
I want to thank you for putting a human touch on how the buildings and what is needed really affects staff and students. It's really important.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Matt.
I know I stepped through that pretty quick, but I promise to be concise tonight.
Yeah, I've got a question, Matt. It's a great laydown. It's nice to see a plan. The question I have, though, pertains to playgrounds, which has been a topic of discussion from time to time in this venue. And technically, I believe it's considered to be a capital improvement. And I'm wondering, since we're going to increase the length of the school day, potentially, it's even more important for kids to be outside. And also, playgrounds are an opportunity for the neighborhood to take advantage of that asset when school's not in session. And I'm just wondering why that, it would be a relatively minor cost driver, I would think, but why that isn't included in the report.
Yeah, historically, we have not used, well, we have done I don't want to say we have not used capital funds to do playgrounds. We have included playgrounds in new building projects. Short of that, they've typically been funded through Roratans or local agencies or PTAs, funding them through, fundraisers and other types of earnings. We had talked about putting that on a capital project plan list here years ago. We had some discussion amongst board members, and at that time, it was kind of decided that we did not feel that that was a capital expenditure, and we would continue to do that through PTOs and PTAs.
And then, just taking off from what you just said, I guess it would be useful to know what is the definition of a capital expenditure rather than, whose opinion is particular, right at the time.
Yeah, I mean.
Is there a definition? A capital expenditure means thus and thus.
Yeah,
Well, I was just gonna say, fundamentally, playgrounds, again, new builds, we would fund the playground. After that, it's not. I think the PTOs and the PAG group have talked about if we do consolidate schools, we have a bunch of equipment out there we might be able to repurpose or reuse. So there are opportunities as we move forward to improve our schools, our playgrounds. But fundamentally, every school district I've been in, it's the original build, and after that, it's up to the PTOs to maintain. Whether it's just your basketball court and paved area and Foursquare and some mulch, sometimes that's usually the bare minimum that we would do, and then they would add the equipment afterwards. It would be a change strategically for many school districts to say we're gonna continue to take on that approach.
Thank you.
Very helpful.
thank you.
Good evening, board and public. Right now, we are going to have a presentation through our partners at RLPS. They came to us in March and presented about north and south, but I can tell you that we have been discussing a lot of different things within our governance team, and an option came out that we would really like to present to you tonight. Towards the end of the presentation, then Matt and I will come up for a little activity. So you have a paper looking like this that we'll use for our activity then. So Mr. Chris Linke and Mr. Andrew Bladen, please come.
Good evening, how you doing?
Good,
How
good.
are you?
Chris, that activity report really sounds like you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for having us here tonight. As Dr. Long said, we are following up on, and we're going to build upon the presentation that we provided last month to you regarding your 7-8 middle school building. So tonight, we will do a quick overview of what we presented last month, but then we're going to take a deeper dive on testing a new middle school at the CAM South site. So just a quick refresh. The study that we're doing is for a middle school, 1,400 to 1,700 students in grades 7 and 8. And we are testing the existing buildings for their worth, and then we also want to test new buildings. At the meeting last month, we did a deeper dive into the existing buildings, and we did some hypothetical talk about new buildings. So tonight, we're going to get into a little bit more hands-on for the new building. So last month, when we talked about the existing buildings, we talked about additions and renovations at CAMS North and additions and renovations at CAMS South. We were similar in the approach at each of those buildings, where the blue shows a new addition to the CAM North building. In the front of the building, the gray block is the existing building, which would be fully renovated. We also went back and looked at the site, tried to improve the circulation, kept the bus circulation on the right-hand side, added and changed the car circulation on plan left to make longer stacking lines, and we kept the front of the building as visitor and staff parking only to separate those two types of circulation. We also were trying to get between the two sites 3 play fields, one of them being a turf And at Cams North, we just happen to have a track around the turf field. The other part about this one was there is very little demolition happening with this. This is all new construction in the front of the building. For Camp South, again, like we said with Camp North, we were putting a new addition on the front. For this one, the circulation was staying pretty much the same. We have the car circulation coming off the bottom part of the site, and we have the bus circulation coming off plan left. We were able to work on 3 fields, with the turf field being in the lower right-hand corner. This one was a little bit more intrusive into the existing building with the auditorium and the front part of the building. We had to tear more down to get this site to work. So we went through a long explanation last time, and then we went through this evaluation sheet. So we had the additions and renovations at Cam North, additions and renovation at Cam South, and then we had a hypothetical new middle school. As we said last time, the new middle school, especially if it was on the Cam South, almost checked all those boxes. We have 12 categories up there. The first 3 are just project information. 4 through 11 were our evaluation, and 12 was our budget. For Cam North and Cam South, just evaluating between those 2, Cam North was a stronger scheme, except the big holdback was its location, that it wasn't located close to the existing high school, so there wasn't a sharing of facilities if you put your middle school at the building north. And as I said, today we're going to do a little bit deeper dive into a new building at Cam South, and I'll let Andy run through that.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate everybody allowing us the time this evening, and I'll grab the marker here. So as Mr. Lincoln just said, we are going to talk about 2 potential options for utilizing the asset that you have in the property at Cam South. Again, location being a primary consideration, but there's a lot of things on that existing site. And so we were charged with testing the site with multiple concepts. We're bringing with you to you 2 concepts this evening, a concept A, if you will, and a concept B. I think the simplest way to describe the difference between the 2 is that concept A contemplates a 2-story classroom wings, which are applicable to your current Cams North and Cams South buildings, and concept B contemplates 3-story classroom wings, which you'll see as we discuss the site affords a lot more opportunity for usefulness of that site, not only for the middle school, but potential to support things here at the high school campus. And so just to remind ourselves here what your existing site plan looks like with Cam South in the middle, you of course have bus circulation planned north and parking visitor circulation, car drop-off circulation planned south off of East McKinley Street. The bus is coming off of Stauffer Avenue, I-81 to the plan east or right-hand side of the plan there, and you have multiple grass play fields and a ball field on the property now. And so the first concept is that 2-story classroom wing. And I think it's also important, before I go into that, just to also touch on, while time does not allow us to get into contemplating phasing and how you might utilize the site as you're constructing a new building, that has been considered as we've been testing the options. We could touch on that briefly. And so the first concept A contemplates that 2-story classroom wing with your core facilities for that new middle school for grades 7 through 8, 260,000 square feet. Hopefully in the center of the plan you can see the outline of Old Cam South, and you can see where the new building is constructed on the north side of that site. Up adjacent to Interstate 81, you see those core facilities, a new gymnasium, a new auditorium, performing arts spaces, and then as you work plan left, you see the new entry with an administration and STEAM areas, technology areas for your students. That administration area is located in the center of the building, and hopefully you see with site circulation, that allows an equitable entry for both your parent drop-off as well as your bus drop-off. Moving to the left-hand side of the scheme, then, you see 2-story classroom wings. You could operate those as one wing being 7th grade, one being 8th, one floor being 7th grade, the second floor being 8th. There's a lot of different operational flexibility built into a plan like this. And those plans are connected at the end with your learning commons, kind of the academic heart of the building, connecting those grades and those classroom areas together. The remainder of the site, of course, is occupied by different site features. Still on the plan right side of the field of the I-81, you see 2 grass play fields. As we move plan left, then we still see parent pickup and drop off of East McKinley Street, and that is paired with the bus drop off still off of Stauffer Avenue there, just oriented a little bit differently than what it is currently, bringing bus and car riders into the same entry. And last but not least, you see contemplated there a new artificial turf field with a track. We're showing a track here to make it applicable to the development that already exists at Cams North. And really, as you reimagine this site, or have the opportunity to reimagine the site, you can see you have the area to contemplate including that as a feature for your middle school students, as well as supplementing things here with the high school. So that's the proposed plan for Concept A. Just going back briefly to the existing site plan again, and then we go into, that's how I like to do it, right, Mr. Bigger? And just go back into Concept B then to recenter ourselves. This is different than Concept A. I think the first thing hopefully we all can see is that those 3-story classroom wings, this is the same 260,000 square feet conceptualized building, the same size core spaces, but going up that extra story gives you some efficiency on the site. It allows you some additional flexibility to orient and restructure the site for car and bus drop off, as well as your playfield considerations. This building here would be built in the kind of planned southeast corner of the site. When you construct the building there, you still have the opportunity to bring a drop-off off of East McKinley, as well as one off of Stauffer Avenue. We're just showing the opportunity to maybe switch that up where you have the buses coming off of East McKinley with a little bit less of a queuing area. The site now allows you additional queuing off of Stauffer Avenue for those car rider lines that we all know are a consideration during site planning. Also notable where the other scheme impacted the bus drop-off circle a little bit during construction. This scheme right here impacts the initial driveway of the existing building coming onto the site because the new building is being built there. But during construction, your other driveway off of East McKinley Street would be open or contemplated to be open for car riders and students. The same core areas here oriented in a different way with athletics, your performing arts, and your cafeteria, kitchen, and administrative area. A similar dual approach there with the entry and the sidewalk bringing students in. STEM and tech in this particular scheme in the Learning Commons form the heart of the building at the intersection of those 2 3-story classroom wings. And that rounds out the building. What's interesting about this is that as you look at how the site is planned out then, the proposed potential for a turf track and field is located up in the northeast corner of the site adjacent to I-81. It's kind of feels good there from a space planning standpoint, site planning standpoint related to the surrounding structures. And that affords you the opportunity to have your additional 2 grass practice fields and maintaining the existing ball field on the site. And so that really rounds out Concept B then, and how you could use Cam South site to support the construction of a new building while Cam South was still in operation. Just briefly in summary here, having a Concept A and Concept B, again, simplest way to designate the two, a 2-story versus a 3-story concept. With the 3-story concept of Concept B, you certainly have a smaller building footprint. There is the opportunity or the necessity maybe to reorient some vehicular circulation, and it locates the larger venue of the track and artificial turf field on the back of the site, if you will, away from adjacent development. Concept A on the other side of things, we can all, I'm sure, see it's a larger footprint just out of necessity with the planned building size. Vehicular circulation ends up being similar to what you have existing as far as driveways entering and exiting the site and the location of the turf and track field. I think Dr. Long and Mr. Varner, it's your turn now for the activity.
We're going to do a little activity.
Oh, absolutely.
We're going to do a little activity, and public, please join in with this. Be thinking. We have 2 buildings on 2 sites. The one building is 65 years old, and the other building is 50 years old, and they're rounded numbers. We're going to have a big claw and remove those buildings from those pieces of property. And we're just looking at the site right now, just the site. North is out on Scotland Avenue. It's on the north end of the borough. Actually on the other side of that, not too far, is the end of the borough. We have the south site where that is on the east side of the borough, correct, or the west side? East side of the borough. And 81 is the line. So I get east and west mixed up sometimes because they all meet, right? They all come around to meet the next way, so. But we want to look at some things that really, if you look at other districts, you look at reading and some of the opinions, so to speak, on architects and also from superintendents. So educational location compared to your high school. And I put Cassius because Cassius is our high school. It's right across the street from here. And what is the educational location from these two sites? What can we do at North that is beneficial, and what can we do at South that would be beneficial? So which site would be more beneficial, and you need to put a plus or a minus, where you have benefits for being close in proximity to your high school? Let me give you some examples of being in proximity for education. You have some very gifted 8th graders. They could take classes at the high school that would enable them to move forward in their studies instead of being locked in at the middle school level. You have other things that the high school has in their building that the middle school doesn't. And let's just pick science. So science could be easily, those kids, instead of getting a bus, they could just walk over because it's less than a mile to the high school from south. Some sites, like we were just at Manheim Township, they were 100 feet from their high school. So it really makes a difference, and the superintendent there was showing us how proximity really makes a difference. The second one is transportation. Right now, we currently have 3 schools, and we're running buses between all 3 of those schools just for the secondary run, 6 through 12. If we had 2 sites, yes, we would be down to 2 schools. So if we looked at North, we would be 3.5 miles away from the high school, and South is less than 1 mile. So which one would save you money as far as fuel and time as well? Athletics. Athletics is something that we're looking at as well. We have 800 students in our athletic programs each year. This year it's 792, so I just rounded to 800. But with that, what kind of things could you do with another turf field that's very close that could allow the high school students to be in one area and maybe the JV team in another area, but also instead of having our lights on until 10 o'clock at night for practices, these students could be getting home a little sooner just because we have a field close by. Project phasing, this is for students. If we get contractors and things like that, they will do the project just as much as we want, but we want to make sure our students are taken care of during the school year. We don't want to have them in quote-unquote little Baghdad like we called the high school when the high school was being renovated. I don't know if any of you were over there at that time. I know Kurt and I were. We walked through and it looked like a bomb went off. I mean, there was wires hanging down. The kids loved it to a point, but what school would be able to do that? What site would be able to do that, I should say, easier? And I know that what they showed you tonight on the screen, Cam South could be completely run without any bother while they were building, and then when they would demo Cam South, then they could move into the new building while they finish the site. So that's what we're looking at there. And then my last one is site acreage. When I look at these 2 sites, I look at acreage. I'm looking for a site for my daughter right now because she's getting married soon. She wants to buy a little piece of property because she doesn't like to mow, where I like to get a big piece of property because she has 2 dogs. Well, we have 1,000 dogs in each school, so to speak. Okay, and the one site is 25 acres, and the other site is 39 acres. So you have more space for those 1,000 students to run. You have more space to look at expansion, and also more things that we can do with that as well. So great, mark your sheets as far as the first 5, and then Matt, you can do the last 5.
Well, thanks, Mark. I guess I get to discuss these last 5 items on the list. So obviously the next one, for comparison, is location within the borough. Well, both schools are located in the borough, which is a more central location. And when I think of central, I think central as compared to central office, our warehouse, our operations, so you kind of get the gist there. Access to Memorial Park. This is kind of a no-brainer, but, is this something important? You think about the aquatic center, potential for field days, potential for combined recreational events with the borough, additional parking, and another one could be a viable reunification site in the event of a school emergency. And then we talk about future building expansion. Which site, and thinking the next renovation ahead for future. If we were to do a renovation to Cams North, what does a future expansion at that location look like? Which site is more beneficial, and which building would be more beneficial without disrupting the day-to-day function of the school? So something to think about there. This one, convenience for families. Maybe that's not important, but you think of shared athletic facilities, and parent pickup. I know selfishly I've been a parent over here at 9:30 at night picking my child up from sporting events, and we have a large family, so we rely on older siblings to provide transportation for younger siblings. And does one site have benefit for another there? And then this one kind of ties back up into my first one, operational efficiency. I mean, closeness to our Chambersburg Police Force and response times and the availability to have administrators, and just thinking about all of those things as we look at both sites, and we for future decisions about which site is better for the new middle school.
So we wanted to present this in a comparison, but also a little activity for you. To be very honest with you, when we were looking at this, we were looking at just showing you what we thought, and we felt it would be a much better to get your thinking about it. Is there any questions that you want to ask about this activity and maybe where you're at with this in your thoughts?
Ward? Go ahead.
What was the site acreage?
25 for north and 39 for south.
First of all, if we were doing renovation, I think that north was the better renovation project.
Yeah.
However, if we're doing new, I'm 100% in agreement that south is the better option. As a matter of fact, a few of you remember a couple years ago when I kind of put the brakes on the whole south renovation project by thinking outside the box, so to speak, of the closeness of the two, et cetera, and so on. And so, as I say, because of the structural issues at south, I was not at all in favor of the rebuild or renovation or whatever at south, but I can see a lot of benefit to south with a new build. I know cost is going to be significantly higher, but one of the things that I've noticed over my lifetime is that boards have often cut corners at the beginning and then regretted it at the end. An example being the Marion Elementary build, should have been 3 deep, not 2 deep. Wrong location, wrong time. I forget what the slogan was in the opposition to even building there. Within how many years was that school filled to capacity? The board that made a decision to build was fighting a battle even to get a 2 deep. we need to make sure that we're not cutting our nose off to spite our face.
And I will say, each one of these builds, we are looking at our current and 1,400, but we've also built it to go up to 1747, 1750. So with that, we do have the expansion available for additional students for sure, and that's going to take us out quite a few years to reach 1750. So yes.
Is there any concern from a safety standpoint to being so near to Stauffer Avenue in the, first of all, I like the smaller footprint, but it's very close to Stauffer Avenue, and one of the things that I've read is that you want to have your buildings away from streets and so forth because of safety issues, and that one moves it real close to Stauffer.
It's closer to McKinley on that
Or
one.
McKinley, yeah,
Yes.
right.
Can you guys help me on that one?
Yeah, I have a related question. Is there also an option to do a 3 high at the location where the 2 high is? Like,
Yeah.
can you, is there,
Yeah, I would,
would that address?
yes,
Yeah.
Our effort was just to show
right,
two different scenarios, two different locations.
Yeah.
But you can take the best of all of those and
Yeah,
put them where it needs to
okay.
be.
Yep.
And I think it's a good point about the location out towards McKinley, that having it back off the site. What you say, they like to see people that are coming towards the building, so having them back off the road would be a safer way to go, as far as the safety and security guidelines go.
The other question that I had has to do with the structural differences. Are you looking at brick versus metal as far as, you know, there's a big difference in cost if you're going to brick versus, there's a lot of buildings now that are.
Most likely, we would do a combination. We still want the most durable down around the ground, but when you get up off the ground after a story, we like to mix in metal for the efficiency and the cost.
What does the new build do to what we need finance-wise then? Because that'll change your numbers if we decide we're doing a new build, will it not? And by how much?
That was the reason we put it at 200, just to consider that.
So that considers the new build money?
Yeah, well, it does, but we're still, the estimates we're at are still estimates.
Right.
You won't know until actual bid day what the number comes in at, but we were forecasting a little bit further down the road. So we want.
That's 25 million.
Yeah, we wanted
To
to-
answer the question, 175 million to 200 million.
Yeah, we wanted to
25
test,
million.
we wanted to test the theory, and I'll use Kurt Whitman. He said, I don't want to look back 10 years and say,
Absolutely.
why didn't we pick south over north? So we're testing this, can we afford it, and also is it possible?
Right, so
And
we've.
I'm not criticizing Last Architect either, but they said, don't build on south new. And we're like, well, let's challenge that, let's get a second opinion, and, you know, they're coming with some options for us.
So the
to
numbers that
consider.
Mr. Fry presented this evening include what it would be to build new on South?
Yes,
Roundabout,
But we don't have numbers for the 4 to 6 building yet or Grandview.
okay.
So we have real big estimates, like first look at it. So if you go to both numbers, yeah, we'd have to do the 2 plus cash on hand.
Okay.
Can I just wanted to say that at the one of the previous meetings, we talked about north and adding on to north and so forth, and I specifically said then that it would be good, how are we going to sell to the public that we didn't build on south because it is near the high school, and the comments were made, well, it's only across town. However, as you sit and you look at it educationally, we're here for the students, and the students having the campus together makes so much more sense with your athletic fields. Kids being on the athletic fields at 10 and 11 o'clock at night, getting home is not healthy. There's so much interaction, plus students being able to go to the high school and that walking distance. But then it comes down to what can we afford? And so, and what we can afford is going to tie into all these other builds that we do as well. I'm sitting here, okay, what's going to happen if, what's going to happen to North? How are we going to use that building? Is there any way of using that building? Like what's the next? But it really does make sense educationally for students to be able to walk back and forth between these buildings. Also makes sense for staff, but 25 million, that's a lot of money. But I do think down the road, people would say, if you're over on the other side of town, even though it was said, well, that's just across the town, it's still across the town. And as Matt said, picking up kids and having kids at different schools and so forth, when you have them right here together at the high school, it does, if we're looking solely at the education for kids, it makes sense to have these two together. The sharing of the facilities, high school coming over, or even high school mentors coming over, kids to mentor at your middle school, or middle school kids going back and forth. And you can put them in a little van and just take them over at different times of the day to get them, and educationally, it's more sound.
Yeah, I've got a couple comments and a question. First, the property at Camps North, to me, would be very attractive to Meadow Haven or Wellsman or somebody else to make that part of the expansion of their campus already. Second, getting across town these days is not like it used to be 20 years ago. And then the question I have, though, is if you go from 2 levels to 3 levels, I know you got to satisfy ADA requirements, and it seems to me if you put a ramp in, that takes up a lot of valuable space, so we're talking elevators.
You're already going to have an elevator in the building at 2 stories. So it's just another stop, it's just another level on stairs. So
the cost
the accessibility and the cost for that is negligible.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris.
When we're talking about location, why are we always talking about location within the borough? Why don't we talk about center for the entire district? Everyone says how close it is to the borough. It's, you can't get across town. Well, where's the center part of the district?
What's the population on that, though?
Yeah, I think if you looked at population, it would be near where Caches is probably.
You think? I don't know.
Or transportation would probably be the best in-house department that could answer that question, right?
I've been here a long time, and I can tell you, each board, when they said about the center of the district, they always considered the high school the center of the district, because that's the pinnacle school. So they always looked at that as the center of the district. So that's what we're looking at.
Interestingly, whenever I was hearing that concern for the Green Village location for the new build there, I sat in the parking lot at Sheets across from where the new build is, and I put in addresses of various people that I knew, and driving time from all points were almost equal, but that's driving time, not distance. And there's a big difference whether you're talking about being able to go 81, the various ways to get to that site. I think that that site, for what we're using it for, is very central, even though it's on the north end. It's that driving issue that it has an advantage. But the junior high, senior high, working back and forth is a whole different ball of worms.
I think too, looking at it from a safety and if we were have some sort of, God forbid, any kind of situation, I think north is a little harder to maintain if you're talking about evacuation or whatever else. If you're talking about staging areas, you have obviously the park that's right across the street. Maybe even some of the parking lots that may be right behind there where the professional buildings are at. Also, I'm looking at too, like after practices or whatever else, all my kids are grown and out of the house or whatever. But it's real convenient when you're having to maybe stop at a store rather than having to run all the way over here or whatever else. And you've got these 2 plazas that are right down the street, whether that's Rural King for whatever you're looking for, horseshoes, I don't know, or if you're looking for, or I mean, there's restaurants and all that. There's stuff that's actually more walking distance, so to speak. That I think that's one of the other things that's probably more advantageous too with the South.
I think one hard part about all this It's not typical for boards to look out 20, 40, and 60 years. It's really hard. Publicly, you're used to, hey, what's the next project? And I think one of the big differences for me is the renovation at North and addition will get you 30 years, but it won't get you 50. Your history has shown that when you do a new build, it lasts 50 years by example. So I think that's part of your decision financially is a 30-year look versus a 50-year look. And I think that's hard to do. And nobody can, have an oracle to look at that. But that is a big difference for us. When you do a major renovation addition, it's probably 30 years and something on the infrastructure you're not fixing. You're renovating it, yes, fully, but infrastructure does begin to fail over long periods of time. So that's a big difference. So 30 years from now looking back, or 50 years looking back, that's what we'd be judged on most of the time, new boards. So the hardest part for any board is to set the next boards up for success. So really think about what are you setting the future boards up for as far as their success. Because it can really build once you get concepts and ideas moving forward. So that's a big picture for me on a 30-year look or a 50-year look.
And I'll just add, thank you for saying that, Chris, but I'll just add that the sequence of things that we have, and it's not necessarily in order, is a Grandview, a 4 to 6 building, a 7 to 8 building, operations consolidation of operation departments, athletic department needs, and then a high school programming like the Ignite. If we do this right, we can knock off athletics with a build and be finished with 2 of those right out of the starting gate. So that's what we're trying to do in planning. That's why we were looking at this little activity as well. So I just wanted to bring that up again, just to remind the public, but also to remind everyone. You guys have anything?
Am I thinking straight here? If we were at, rather than right now we have 2% built into our budget, 1% of that is allocated towards capital, right? If that was so it's really a 1 + 1. If that was a 1 + 2, there's your 25 million, right? Spread out over 25 years. If you're up $1 million,
Yeah, I'd have to ask Tammy and John for the exact math, but yeah.
Basically, if we, is that right? And you could say, well, we're just going to fund half of it that way, right? If we went to 2.5% this year, 1% for education, 1.5% for capital, then you have half of your $25 million increase covered that way. That's an approach that we could take. I'm not saying we should, but
I think the task for the board for me is say, okay, 200, go build what you can build. What can you do with that, and come back to us. And so I've said this all along. It's not the plan that's the wrong idea. It's just how long it's going to take. Some will go faster, and then you have to pause and wait. Others can move ahead. But you have to do some form of 7, 8, and 6, because you're removing 6th grade from the conversation. And so, we've thought of contingency plans that, and if we did the 7, 8 first and it was more expensive, worst case scenario, you do the 5, 6, but not the 4th initially, but build for the wing. So you do Grandview and a 5, 6 as a relief valve.
right.
Just to buy yourself some more time.
Yep.
If you do it the other way and do 4, 6 Grandview first, then you come back to 7, 8, it's harder to do. So I'm not liking saying that out loud.
Yeah.
But whenever you worry about, the dollars, you have to figure out where your relief valves are. But I think the task is what's our budget build number, and then we go figure out what we can afford. And that was the litmus test. I think the small number of the middle school estimate was 110, and the upper end of the renovation was 91, correct? 91 for the renovation at North, the upper estimate number.
That's right.
So your 91 to 110 is your gap between renovation at North and new at South. Could we close that gap? Who knows? Who knows? And so,
We're definitely still considering Grandview.
oh yeah, they're
I
all
wanna
on the
make sure.
table.
Yeah,
It's just
I
how
wanna
fast
make
we.
sure.
Right.
And am I correct in thinking that 3 high would be slightly less expensive till it's all said and done?
That's correct.
You're building up.
It comes down to you have less footings.
Do you
You're
have,
dealing with.
is that like 1%, 2% less?
I think you're probably talking of savings in the hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Okay, minimal. Still worth something.
So,
So as far as, next steps, I'm sure Mr. Bigger will give us some of those as well. But looking forward to responding to your feedback from this evening, and then working towards that recommendation, and then also keeping the eye on the prize when it comes to operations and facilities and your athletics to get everything wrapped up for you on that end of things as well.
We appreciate the analysis and the speed in which you've helped us, at least evaluate things.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, item 4.05, teacher pipeline. This is Mrs. Lautenslager. I like teacher preparation program better than teacher pipeline. I wrote it right off my agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Whitman.
You do have a couple seconds here. Diana is switching some things over for us. Thank you. Definitely hydrate. It's been many presentations. I am your brain break for this evening. I will not make you think millions of dollars. 3-story buildings. No, we're just going to talk kids. We're going to talk programs.
Thank you in advance for that.
Good, yes. Maybe shake it off a little bit. Okay, so Kurt has been around. He has been giving everyone a handout. This is a little different than a normal slide presentation this evening, because what I want to have at the conclusion of this, which this is a work in progress, it is a draft. It's really an informational guide. It's going to be a document that we can share with individuals as they are thinking through their next steps as to, working on a teacher certification. So we're looking at, how do you do that? What are the ways to do that through Chambersburg School District as far as a grow your own teacher preparation program? We've had this conversation many times. It's been a topic that's come up whenever we go to school visits, looking at the CASD blueprint, even way back the comprehensive plan several years ago talked about this, and into schools of distinction. Key points from the discussion were around teacher recruitment, developing interest. How do we develop interest in teaching through our current programming, or even how do we expand programming to be able to do this? And then, of course, our prioritization of career and college readiness pathways. So I know in your travels and in different presentations, I'm sure you've been hearing about these topics, and this sort of stems from that and has been discussed through different meetings and events that we've been to and looked at. This is a group effort. I have been working with HR. I've been working with district administrators, building administrators, to research programs in other states, to look at existing experiences that we have, existing coursework that we have, to be able to weave what we have currently into what makes a successful program that you see in the research, that you see in other schools, so that we can create a path to teacher certification that's for our students and our staff. And the guide that you have in front of you is really that attempt to capture the work, not only by me, but other groups, other departments, and other administrators in the district. So that's just sort of a little hint of what's to come. And the first page of the document you have, you also see it projected up here, is an overview of that teacher preparation program. Now, I'm not going to read all of that to you, but it really just hits the what, the why, and the who. So what is it? We're really about developing or recruiting educators from within the district and our local community, but also being able to provide that assistance, provide that aid, provide that guidance that it's not always really easy when you're working with PDE. How do you go to college, you get your coursework, but then there's also other things that goes into getting that teacher certification, and being able to have that support for our staff and or our students moving forward. Why create it?
definitely teacher shortage. Let me just come down here just a little bit. Teacher shortages always, I was even on the news this morning, discussing that not only in Chambersburg, but across the state. Recruiting from community also strengthens the student-teacher connections. So another key component of, our students within our districts, but then also our individuals within our community, and being able to recruit them, that our students will connect to people that they know in the community. And even some of the research is talking about cost effectiveness. And then the last piece there is who's eligible. So prospective staff members with a bachelor's degree. HR works extensively with individuals that have bachelor's degrees to get them emergency certifications. Paraprofessionals and teaching assistants, all individuals that are already working with us, and how can we, get them to teacher certification. And the new piece is high school students. So I'm going to talk briefly about our current employees, but I really want to focus the rest of our conversation, or the look at the document, around what we can do for our high school students. So we're going to go into page 2, if you're following along in the document there. And I was sort of expanding my learning a little bit by using a different tool to create this. So bear with here a little bit as I zoom in and out. So this page 2 gives you the overview for 3 main groups within our district. Column 1 are high school students. Column 2, para-educators, also teacher assistants in column 2. And then column 3, those individuals with bachelor's degrees. So just to direct your attention to column 2, column 3 right now, because that's just going to be a quick overview of those 2 work groups. The process for the individuals that would fall into these 2 columns really already exists for them through either the support staff bargaining agreement or the CAEA bargaining agreement. So those individuals already have a process outlined for them to be able to get coursework reimbursed, and how to or where to take classes to get credits that would apply to a teacher certification. When you look at the paraeducator, the teacher assistant column, those individuals are usually starting at the beginning, so they are going to be working on undergrad coursework. The individuals with a bachelor's degree, they're going to have more of graduate coursework as they go through, and even, because they have some credits under their belt, it might not take them as long. So now I did add a page. This is just more for the presentation tonight. The next page really just is what we wanted to look at, and I'll zoom in here a bit on high school Grow Your Own. So, very first box, what's happening here? These are high school students taking classes, taking their academic coursework. These are the classes that they're going to need for high school graduation. Then they're going to have the opportunity, outside of academic coursework, to take dual enrollment courses. The dual enrollment courses could be college in the high school, where they're taking a class with our teachers and getting college credit for it, or it could be a dual enrollment course where they're taking a class on a college campus with a professor at a local community, like a Wilson College or a Shippensburg. So this first box, step number 1, is really what the students are doing right now. We have students doing this at Caches, at CMS, as far as the academic coursework and getting some dual credit for that. The change here would be, or the addition here would be, the teacher preparation coursework for grades 10 through 12. So in combination with the academic coursework and the dual enrollment coursework, the students would also be provided, starting in grades 10 and 11, the opportunity for classroom observations, getting out there, doing some shadowing, those kind of things out in buildings. Then their senior year, their 12th grade year, is where they would move into actual classroom placements and having what's called a student internship. So this is really that focused piece where they're getting intensive experience with a teacher and students in a classroom that senior year. And what you want to keep in mind here, you know, we do have, it's not like none of this exists. We do have some of this in play right now in our coursework academically. More of the work to get some of the teacher core courses is what we would be doing into the future. Okay, so now for what I think is just sort of exciting, gets me, you know, sort of geek out on this part when I think about program development and what we can do for our students. Not to downplay anything that's happening with the coursework in step number 1, because that's some pretty neat stuff happening there too with our teachers and with our university partners that we already have. But when our students leave us, okay, so step number 1 is complete. They've had their classes. Their senior year, they've had this key student internship with a classroom teacher in a classroom in the district, okay? All of that has happened. Now they're gonna leave us. They're gonna leave us and they're gonna go to college and they're gonna finish, they're gonna get their teacher certification. They're gonna work on their degree and they're gonna get their teacher certification. There are really 2 options here in step number 2. It's the traditional option that you're probably used to, undergrad coursework. They go out to a college or a university of their choice, they leave us. But what's different is now, because of this program, they're leaving us with some experience. They're leaving us, you know, with a little bit of that magic of being in a classroom under their belt, and they're gonna go and they're gonna do their dream of being a teacher at their university. They're gonna graduate in 4 years, maybe a little less because some of the dual enrollment work that they've been doing in step number 1. But they're gonna go out, they're gonna complete that degree, and then end up with their teacher certification. Now, the new option, the next piece that is sort of like in development and a little different is being able to take that student internship, continue that with Chambersburg School District. So they're not gonna leave us completely. They're still gonna go to college. They're still gonna pick a university of their choice. But they're going to also still have some part-time hours with us as a CASD employee. So that internship their senior year turns into a part-time employment opportunity so that they can go to school and work with us and be in the classroom. So while they're learning new techniques in their college classes, they can come back and practice those in the classroom while they're, you know, having that employment opportunity as a teacher's assistant. Or they are, you know, a teacher's assistant and they have some real world experience and they can connect that to what they're learning in the classroom when they go to college. So it is a really unique opportunity that starts in step 1, that senior year with the student internship, that when they get to step 2, they're still going to college. They're, again, maybe not taking as long because they have some dual enrollment classes under their belt. And then they're gonna finish and they're gonna graduate just like the traditional student, but now we have a higher probability of bringing them back to us after they have that teacher degree, after they have that teacher certification. And being able to hire them either as a paraprofessional, maybe they're not quite ready, or maybe we don't have a position just yet, wherever they're specializing in, but they would be able to transfer in or be hired for a paraprofessional, or if a position is open, then we can hire them as a teacher. So a lot of amazing things that are happening there while they are, you know, in that sort of concurrent ability to do both college and some employment, you know, tied together. So After then, they graduate. Oh, and I don't want to forget about the traditional pathway. So they aren't working for us. They're out and about. They're going to get their certification. But now when they come back, because they participated in that pathway, maybe when they go through that interview process, they get a priority over others in that interview process because they participated in our program to do that. Just want to make sure I didn't miss anything. Oh, and the key piece, too, with that TA position is getting some tuition reimbursement because they're an employee. They're connected to that support staff contract, and they can get some tuition reimbursement to help them with, college costs. And then just step number 3, everybody knows, you have those certification exams, your clearances, just some of those extra pieces that they have to do. Whoop. So, next page, I've been talking an awful lot about coursework, but just wanted to give an example. Now, this isn't set in stone. This is just looking at some classes that we have. As a student, or families trying to decide, what do I want to do? Is this a pathway that I want? What am I going to have to work through for 4 grades? 9th grade is pretty standard, but with the teacher preparation piece, we could get some mentor time in there for those students. And each area is broken down into the academic core and then the teacher preparation core. And then when you see grades 11 and 12, this is where the teacher preparation core has, those key pieces of the observation hours, the pre-apprenticeship or the internship in the classrooms, or even a co-op experience, however we can, build that in for the students. The last page is really just the overview, again, of employees that already work with us. What are the courses that they would have to take? And what I really just want to highlight is here at the bottom, these 2 boxes. Your paraeducators, your teacher assistants, they may not be coming in with any coursework, so they are starting from the beginning, and that's where you see the 120 plus credits required. They may not have any dual enrollment classes, so it might take them 4 years to, complete that. A post-bac, somebody that has that bachelor's degree, again, credits will vary because they have some of that completed, and the accelerated program is what's sort of nice for these individuals, because what is happening now, Wilson College has that accelerated program in place for those folks with bachelor's degrees, and we currently have employees that are taking advantage of that opportunity. So just in closing, that's really, again, this is a draft, not set in stone, but giving you a framework of what this could look like as we continue to, number 1, what do we have? What's in place now in Chambersburg? We don't want to forget about the tiny Trojan lab classroom, where they're getting, some of that experience. We don't want to forget about our awesome co-op program that are getting students out into not only elementary schools, but middle school and, other opportunities for co-op, shadowing and mentoring. And then FCCTC, they have the early childhood program. Currently, we have 6 students. We had 3 in the first semester and 3 in the second semester. Second semester, sorry, I'm dry. With the FCCTC program. And again, when you think of the number of students, just this year alone, Shippensburg University had a Aspire Summit that was geared towards teachers, counselors, and social workers. And I believe we had 20 students that participated in that. So when we see that we have 6 students that are in FCCTC, we know we have work to do. We have students in the pipeline, and how do we, continue to develop that interest in them or with them to get that teacher certification? Step number 2, what do we need? Anytime you see teacher core in those boxes as far as coursework, that's what we need. we're going to have to build that either by ourselves, or we're going to have to work with a university partner to have that as a college in the high school or a dual enrollment opportunity. And then step number 3, to really make step number 2 happen, is to have that community partnership with higher ed. Who can we get to work with us that will make this a seamless transition from high school student intern through college through to that teacher certification program? We have neighbors, we have people in our backyard, we have colleges and universities really close. Who can we get to be that partner to make this happen for our students? So those are sort of the 3 next steps that we're going to continue to do to frame this out even more over time. So thank you. And any questions?
Yes. This is a fantastic program. It's going to really pay dividends if it comes to fruition. I'm happy to support it any way I can. My only question is, how would it work for a student that goes to a college that's kind of not local with the teacher's assistant? I mean, would their schedule concurrent with ours, maybe would they be able to participate in the summer, or how would that work? Or is that just really not practical?
Well, I think that those would be questions we'd have to look at. We would have to see, where, if a student's going to Pittsburgh to get their teaching degree, then
like that.
They would be on that traditional route. They would go, they would complete that, but we would have documentation of them being part of the program, grades 9 through 12, really intensive part of the program, 11 and 12. And then we could figure out a plan on how we could give them priority when they graduate and apply for a position with us over others who did not have a teacher preparation program.
Thank you very much.
Would there be a commitment for the people who complete the whole education program, get the certification, that they would come back here?
Well, and that is definitely a topic that we've talked about.
Yeah, I'll jump in there. I mean, we want to incentivize our graduates to go through the program and come back and work for us, and that's financial incentive. So whether we help with some of the dual enrollment or college and high school, or when they return to us, maybe we reimburse some of their tuition if they went away. It's very common in healthcare, it's very common in military, that if you complete our program, go and come back, we help with reimbursement of some of that. So we'd be looking to do that to incentivize them to come here.
I guess I question, and maybe it's my personal thing, I had no idea what I wanted to be when I was that age. And when I see you mentioning starting a curriculum in 9th grade, going all the way through, sometimes students change their minds. Sometimes they change their minds frequently. What's the workaround going to be for that? I think this sounds wonderful, but I'm just thinking, I would hate to see us be disappointed. And it sounds like you already have a solution to that.
Yeah, I mean, definitely looking at grades 9 and 10, that's fluid and flexible. So many of the academic courses that they're going to take in those 2 years are really going to apply to a variety of career paths, not necessarily just a teacher preparation pathway. And that's where the mentoring comes in into play, really important in 9th grade, and not just 9th grade. I mean, I have it listed there, but we really need to do that the whole way through to have those conversations with students and, understand where they are at that point. Because like you said, I mean, I have a soon-to-be 21-year-old, and I have a senior that's going to graduate this year. And I've watched them both change direction the 4 years through high school. So knowing, not just with the teacher preparation program, but many of the programs we talked about with Ignite and what that building or opportunity could be, it really has been, and Brad and I have talked about that, even at the other content areas or the other programs that could fit in there, that, that flexibility is in 9 and 10, that if they change their mind, it still fits. Where you're really getting, into it, and, that intense focus is going to be your 11th and 12th grade year.
Thank you.
Yep.
Is the goal for the teacher preparation core in 10, 11, 12 that they would get college credit for this?
If we can nail down that community partner, you betcha.
Because that really you could shave off a year of their bachelor's or more with that, and that's a lot of incentive.
And I think when you look at the second page, The boxes for the high school, I believe I put in there, potential credits, and I was probably a little conservative. I think I had 15 credits or 20 credits.
15 to 20.
15 to 20 credits in that top box for the high school students as far as college and the high school or dual enrollment. But if students are aggressive, and especially with the block schedule and how they take their courses and summer opportunities, if we can get that key community partner and they can do things over the summer as well, I think the opportunity would be there. We were hoping, when Chris and I started this conversation at the beginning of the school year, we were really hoping that there would be a way to have, 1 year ready to go, and then they only have 3 to complete when they get to university. But, that may be a little aggressive at the beginning.
It takes time, but, we have local universities that are already providing some of these courses.
What we saw at Ignite, which was really interesting, it wasn't narrowing it just to be a teacher. They said, hey, how about you be in the education profession? You want to be a speech pathologist? You want to be a psychologist? You want to be a teacher, early childhood? You want to be a researcher?
Good idea.
You want to work in, just get into the education field. There's all kinds of options for you.
Yes.
So it was more about just getting them in the field, and then we find out where they want to end up. And I really liked that Ignite did that. They said many kids start out as, hey, I want to be a math teacher because I love my math teacher. And then no, I don't want to do that. Now I want to be a social worker. So
And
it's
I
more
think
about the field.
Even though, we labeled it teacher preparation, the courses that you see there are foundation,
Yes.
foundational. So they will apply to a social worker, a counselor. I'm not quite sure on the school psychologist. I actually have an FCCTC student that is with me right now in a classroom. She's being an intern. We have her in a classroom at Stevens, I believe. And she already has decided she's going to a university to be a psychologist. Now, I have to sort of dig into, all right, where does that align? Because school psychologist versus regular psychologist, I would have to get into that a little bit more with the university to see what we offer and how that ties to them. So somebody that gets in maybe a little bit more specialized that way may not have as many credits, but there would be something there for them. And it still keeps opportunities open for the really just education profession in general.
This is a great guideline, so thank you for putting this together.
Yes. Well, again, we're going to have more to add to it. Like I said, the team that we talked with, we want to add in, some other pieces about scholarships and different things that way to really round it out for individuals, so that when we get this the way we really like it, then counselors can hand it out to students, HR can hand it out to folks who are interested in future employment and get that kind of guide of we start here to get here.
Now, what about students? A lot of students are doing online education today. Because would those students be able to do the online education and still be in the program? Because a lot are earning their bachelor's. So many universities, the online program's bigger than the on campus.
Yes, so the key piece is going back to the university of their choice. So we don't have anything saying any one university at this time. So, and especially if you're that traditional student and you're not coming back to us, you're going to be able to pick one of your choice. If you're doing one online and you're housed here, then you could potentially do that part-time thing, like what we were talking about with, the new opportunities of, being a student intern, staying here working part-time, and then you have an online university that is, offering a teacher degree. So they are out there. I will caution, and this is only because part of my job is to work with our individuals in-house to approve their coursework. There are some that have better credentials than others.
Oh, yes, no doubt.
And so, I do try to work with individuals and to look at where they might be, looking for their degree and helping them understand that type of credentialing to look for a nice program that's really going to give them what they want.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yep.
I have a comment and a question. I like the fact that you added these numbers in here so people can kind of see what it's going to add up to as far as credits and per
It's always
credit.
changing,
Yeah.
but yep.
But I mean,
Yep.
you get a kind of a ballpark on that. That's great.
Mhm.
One of the other things I wanted to know is especially for us, we're and I think my colleague Mike had mentioned this a couple months back about minority teachers. Are we doing anything with this student body to maybe encourage the Hispanic, Black, Asian, Haitian population to maybe go down these pathways? I saw just recently, I think it was, I don't know, only 10%.
Well, I think it was on the
teachers
news
of-
this morning that just for Pennsylvania alone, 90%.
90%, yeah, that's
Right.
okay, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. And so that for me, that's very, I think that's, especially knowing the way our minority populations are growing, I think when you're talking about representation and teachers in spaces that can kind of grasp a hold of and understand what some of their students may be going through.
Right.
I think that's vitally important to have.
I agree. And having Maggie Hoover as the college and career advisor between the two high schools, and I think that's the other component to having this type of document is to bring those players together within the district. Maggie, the counselors, HR, and how can we, be proactive in getting, a variety of individuals interested in the teaching field. Just going to Shippensburg, it was also neat to see the male population that, you see so many female teachers out there. And I was like, wow, there's a nice representation of male students being interested in teaching that I haven't, been seeing lately. But nice to see that at Shippensburg in that program or, that event that they had that day. But to your point, definitely work that needs to be done. And how can we, use this as that springboard to bring individuals together. And I know Maggie works really hard to get the word out about these kind of events to, going back to the initial point of, driving that interest in the field and getting that out to everyone. The young lady that I was saying that is right now a student intern from FCCTC. So she's a Chambersburg student. And then for her co-op for the tech, I was able to place her in our classroom. And she's Hispanic and at Stevens and can speak Spanish, and they love her there, and she's the one that's going for psychology. So, the principal there, we're, trying to think, how can we maybe keep her and start this early and see how that works to, help her out with some tuition if she wants to work part-time and go to either Wilson or Shippensburg. I can't remember which one she was picking.
And just a bit of historical information. You mentioned male teachers. I know that part of in some unintended consequences, I think of some of the things that when we fix things or we're trying to, when we had the desegregation years ago, that was one of the reasons why we lost a lot of African American teachers, especially male teachers. If you look that up, some of the unintended consequences of desegregation. And to this day, we're still hurting for African American teachers, especially male African American teachers. So if you look that stuff up, don't take my word for it, but these are some of the things that we're dealing with now because of some decisions that we made in the past. And so I think it's vitally important that we make the right decisions now so our future isn't adversely affected.
Yeah, I agree, absolutely.
I'd just like to say that I was so excited whenever I saw this because this is what I've been looking for. And as far as people changing their mind, that's a positive, not a negative, because I have more experience in healthcare, but I have seen so many registered nurses graduate with limited experience in the field, and then they have all this money spent on an education and they hate it. This is giving them an insight into what they're going to be experiencing. The likelihood that the ones that change their mind
would be teachers who really weren't I don't want to say dedicated, but it would not be their passion. But there are people, as I've seen in healthcare, who have no option but to continue on the pathway that they really don't like because they are making good money doing something that they couldn't make that money someplace else.
Or they
And
start
so-
over, and it's hard to start over when you're that far in at times.
Right, exactly. So I think it's a wonderful opportunity, and I can just see that potential. And how soon is this going to start?
Well, those are, you know,
You have a meeting tomorrow, don't you?
right, yes, we do. Yes,
Yeah.
we do have a meeting tomorrow on the higher ed side to look at that partnership. But, you know, like I mentioned throughout, I didn't want you to think, you know, we're at ground zero. We're not. We're not. You know, we have pieces of this in place. And the 6 students from FCCTC, I've been working with them as interns in placements this year and seeing how it's going with them, how it's going with the teachers. And I'm going to talk to Chris to see about, is there a way that maybe we can keep them on over the summer, and then maybe even, you know, if they're interested, to do, you know, part-time and college, and see if we can work on some of these pieces with that second option. Yep. Well, thank you. I'm glad you hung in there with
Yep,
me.
thanks, Crystal.
It's been a long night, and if you have
Well done.
questions, just email. Diana, I'm not sure.
Thank you, Mrs.
Good.
Lautenschlager.
Thank you.
All right, consent agenda items. Chris and your team, do you want to talk about any of the items 5.01 through 5.11? And we'll ask board members if they have any questions on any of them.
I don't have any this time. I'm looking to Mark and Kurt. Do you have any?
The only thing I would like to point out is that 510, the example of the uniform is back in the back corner. That is the back side of the uniform. The front side is just blue with a zipper. It's really intricately made because right now we have uniforms that have to be altered through sewing, and inside the sleeves and inside the pants legs are snaps, and they're every inch. So they just snap them then and then iron the bottoms of them, and they can last a long time with the snaps.
Okay. Nothing else, Chris?
Nope.
Board members, any questions on any of the items 501 through 511?
I don't have any questions, but I'd just like to say that I was thrilled to see the students who have early graduation and the variety of reasons for early graduation. They're all Cassius students, if I remember correctly. And that was one of my comments some time ago, that it seemed like all of our early graduations, or most of them, were coming from CMS. And so I'm thrilled to see that we're getting some early graduations from Cassius. And the opportunity for these students who are going into the job market, their option might have been dropping out because those needs for finances were spoken to in their comments. And having a high school diploma makes all the difference in the world down the road. And so I commend everyone who had any input into that. And I personally sent a thank you to Brad Ocker, because I know that he has been instrumental in some of those students' lives.
Other questions or comments? Because I have two, but you all go first. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go, please.
This is in conjunction with 701 partially. I'm curious to know if any other board members think that we ought to take a look at 501
Yes.
and shift that tax increase from 2% to something slightly more? Or am I the only one that, but I also think the discussion about
We'll get to
701
We'll get
might-
we'll get to 7 next.
might bring clarity on that, so,
Wait, we'll get to 7 next.
Okay, so for 5, am I the only one that thinks we ought to consider something slightly higher, or does everybody else feel like where we're at is great?
No, that was actually gonna be one of my comments, Mr. Rivers, so I'll jump in here now.
Well, let me just add.
Well, I'll finish first, please.
Okay, I thought you wanted other comments first.
Yeah, so one of my comments on that, and I wrote the notes as we've had a lengthy discussion on items. I would suggest for 501 that for fiscal year end 2006, we move 2 million to capital reserve instead of 4 million. Okay, we keep the 5.5 million to debt service. Okay, and I am concerned with the 2%, and the reason I'm concerned with the 2% historically, and you all can badger me for my history lesson. Love you, Dad. He was a history teacher, but historically, anything under 2% for operations, we fall behind. It's probably closer to 3%. You know, there's been history about previous boards and some of the infinite wisdom of some of those previous board members. Chris, I think you were in the audience one day on the final budget vote one night. They decided to change the tax increase from 2% or from 3% to 1%. Poor Steve Dart, you know, had a week to change it. And we paid for that because that is a reoccurring. And you look at operation, and if you go back and you look at our budget, I'll bet you that that operational increase, the cost of doing business is about 2 to 3% increase every year. So if you don't do 2% operational increase, then, you know, then you're gonna have trouble. Mr. Bigger, I appreciate your point that, you know, with all the other money, you know, it shouldn't be higher. Well, then take it out of somewhere else. Okay, we're not gonna tell you how to spend it, you decide how to spend it. As far as the $2 million deficit on capital reserve versus a 2 million instead of 4 million, I'm gonna say do it the old-fashioned way, right? If the money comes in, if the revenue comes in, or if the expenses are less, then we do it the old-fashioned way. At the end of the year, there's an excess, and you move the excess to capital reserve. That's the way we've done it for years and years, and I don't like the idea of budgeting that much capital reserve. I like the incentive to the administration that, all right, put all your coins in the piggy bank, and then at the end of the year, you can move your piggy bank to capital reserve, or anywhere else you want to move it to. But don't just, we can't budget for everything, it goes to my tax and spend. So that's what I would like to propose for, that would be a 2%, it'd be 3%. 2% operation, and the X is 1%. And I'd love to see Mr. Fry's number with that 1% in fiscal year 2006, what that does in column 7 that we looked at. So I would be at 3% to answer your question, Mr. Raver.
I think if the cap reserve ends up, if the piggy bank ends up being fuller than, or as full as we hope, at the end of the year, that's your 25 million till the 25 years are over. Does that make sense?
You can put it anywhere you want, exactly.
Right.
Put it in capital reserve, you can put it in debt service, you can put it in health savings fund, wherever we have to move it to. That's an administration's decision, but I don't like just moving 4 million there right off the bat. Mr. Haydick.
So did I understand you to say that you will be willing to see a 3%?
I've always been about 3%, yes, sir.
I concur.
I concur.
Yeah, I agree too, with the caveat of it's not a tax and spend. It's not a, if we go to 3%, well, now we can do more. We need to stay with the plan and aim to have that extra at the end, not aim to spend it just because we have it.
Yeah, I had actually sent a note to Mrs. Stauffer this afternoon saying, what if we had 2% go into that capital reserve, that, you know, little set aside, and only with the consent of the board could it be spent on anything other than what we initially put it there for. If it's operational cost, that's another story. We got to really have a debate on that. But setting aside, and If we were having a natural disaster, we'd be concerned how it's going to affect our district. When we're having a national disaster, with what's going on, decisions made about tariffs and how it's going to affect the economy, so we got to be conservative, but at a certain point, we've got to take care of ourselves here because we can't count on the federal government so much at this stage. Maybe that changes tomorrow, but we'll see.
Actually, the fact that we added the 1% the last couple of years has really set us up nicely for going into a building project. So that's why I am okay with the 2%, with the 1% going into helping us with the building project.
Another 1%, it'd be that
Yeah, the additional
5.5 million
1%.
plus.
I know you already put
plus
it
the
in there,
1%.
but that, yeah, would be 2,
To debt service.
yes. 2 to debt service.
Other questions, discussions, 5.01? Do you have anything else on that one, Mr. Raber?
Now, I mean, one thing we can, if the public asks us questions about it, I think it's fair to point out that the Homestead Act has been generous increase every year, the last 4 or 5 years, something like that. And so that offsets any increases we're having anyways. I mean, I looked at my own stuff and I'm paying $1.36 more per month than it was 5 years ago. So it's because of Homestead, right? That's in real estate taxes. So
Again, I'm in favor of 3% this year. I will caution, I don't subscribe to that rationale on Homestead because there's those who don't get that credit, but then still get the repercussion from their landlords.
fair enough. Yeah.
Any questions, Mrs. Stauffer? Thank you.
Just confirming, I'm hearing build a 3% budget to bring in as the final budget, 3% tax
And
increase.
change the 4 million transfer, whatever, to 2 million.
Yep,
And add 1% on debt service transfer.
Did mention that it was going to be fluid, so.
We didn't.
We did. Thank you.
We didn't wait till the June meeting to.
well, and I greatly appreciate it because I actually remember that meeting, and I remember Steve was in a sweat because it was very difficult to try to run those calculations, so I thank you for that.
It happened to be an election year, too, I think. But anyway.
You could be right.
5.08, just a little bit of context on that. Is that Mr. Widman, Mr. Bigger?
Mark and I can take that one. I did sit on a presentation on his behalf. The ROTC program is certainly very distinguished, and lots of people want to participate. So if you read any of the background knowledge or background information there, they're ready to increase numbers. So 150 was the cap before. By adding a third instructor, it would go to 250. Also, neighboring districts, or cross-enrollment it's called, would send more students to help offset those costs. The last component, which wasn't the primary component, we do have 2 instructors who are short-timers. So we do want to make sure we get another one in, as one is, or 2 are going to set to sunset or retire in the next 3 years or so. So they're a little bit worried about succession planning and maintaining the quality. And so this was somewhat of a very easy decision for us because it's cost neutral as long as we get the cross-enrollment students.
How many do we have enrolled this year?
10 or 11. It's 10 or 11.
No.
For cross, total.
Chambersburg students.
Oh my gosh, what was the presentation he gave last month?
I think he said like 136 or something.
Somewhere in that.
What's that?
Like 136,
Yeah.
I think is what he said.
Because is 110 the minimum? There's a minimum of
100.
100, okay.
And there were 211 students interested this year, for next year, just from Chambersburg.
But it always dives down.
It does, yeah.
Just like the 136 today was probably
190.
150
Yeah.
back at the beginning of the school.
I think it was 190 the previous year, it's 211 this year, so we saw 20 more kids.
What do
have
the other
interest.
districts, what is, I don't know, is it a tuition or
Yeah.
what's the agreement per student for the other districts?
Go ahead, Tammy.
So for this year, we will be billing the other districts, if the student's there for the full year, $2,000. We will prorate it based on an ADM calculation. If they came in for one day and left, we're probably not going to do that because it would be really cents on the dollars. But if they stayed a month, we will bill them for that month.
How about mileage or anything like that?
They transport them, we don't do that.
They come here, we don't,
We're not transporting them.
and our staff does not have to leave district.
As far as I know,
Very little. He'll do some recruiting, I believe.
Yeah.
Okay.
The other component to that would be, I have to work with the county superintendents. We have a meeting next Thursday, confirm the agreement with the increase in cost and make sure that they have students that are interested. So once that's confirmed, then the agreement would come here with the new criteria.
And just as another history lesson, love you, Dad. Right, these instructors, their salary is based, Department of Navy tells us what their salary is.
Yeah.
They're not per the CAEA contract. It's a minimum salary.
And we get reimbursed.
Per the Department of Navy. But we get reimbursed.
Yep.
50%.
Mhm. See what happens when you miss a meeting, Mark? I have to remember all that detailed information.
Thank you so much.
Okay, any other questions, comments on the consent agenda 5 series? If not, there'll be one vote next. Will the budget be a consent, or should that be its own line next meeting?
Well, that's a good question. We'll do our best. I think we can get it updated before the 22nd. I think we should have it as a separate item
Yeah.
because we're changing it.
I agree. Thank you. Okay, 7.01, the resolution. I too have some comments on that, but Mr. Raber, you started it, so please, you're first.
I think I'll pass it right back to you.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, my mic was off.
No, that's fine. I mean, for the most part, really just maybe some minor suggestion tweaks on this, again, from when this was born. It was born at a set 1% and born specifically for capital reserve fund.
Correct.
Just looking at Mr. Fry's presentation, which in 2027, I think it's 1.63, and there's discussion tonight about maybe higher than 1%. Should this be more generic instead of specifically saying 1%, basically a percentage, I don't know how you would say that, but each year the board would decide what a percentage would be? I don't want to call it a variable percentage, but, so in 2027, if you go Mr. Fry's report, it's 1.63%. So we have a resolution that says 1%, and if we follow the script that we saw tonight, it's actually going to be 1.63% a year from now.
Well, the wording in there says to make a minimum recurring annual transfer equal to 1%. So to me, if I read that, it says at minimum you do 1%, which gives you latitude to go above that.
What's the new one say? This is the old one.
So the new one, and again, I just put proposed language based on discussion with Chris.
So that one says equal, this is the new one?
Yes, equal to.
Why was that change made?
I think that actually the one that we have on there may have been oh gosh, did I mess this up again?
I think you did.
I think I might have put the wrong one on here. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. It's lots of pieces of moving parts going around. It would go back. Really, the intent of the change, and if anything that I did with this document, which I will go back and use the other document, would be to give us flexibility of whether or not that 1% goes into the capital reserve fund or it's used for future debt service. That's really all I intended to do.
That was going to be my other comment, and again, when this was born, it was born for capital reserve, thinking that eventually it was going to be debt service. And one thing with the resolution, this board, or whenever there is a different board, the board can change this resolution at any point. Now that we are getting closer to, September, 4 months, 5 months.
For first borrow.
For first borrow, that should this not just say debt service fund and take capital reserve fund out of it completely for now and focus on the debt service fund? Again, capital reserve, fund it the old-fashioned way, what's left in the piggy bank, and then go to capital reserve.
I got to think about that a little bit. I do like the flexibility
Agreed.
of it being one or the other. Both of these funds once the money gets in there, it has restrictions. So when I put money in debt service, I can't pull it out for a capital project. I can pull it out to pay off debt service.
Right.
You know what I mean? So what I would be able to do in future years is offset that reoccurring expenditure. I think actually putting it in the cap reserve gives you more flexibility.
Right.
And
I would say, as you think that through, let's say we get to a point where the debt service is now funding the projects we bring to you.
Then you change the resolution.
Well, you could change it, or we can just continue and say, oh, now we have Matt's plan to get us through those gap years. We're going to move the 1% over to the capital projects then, which would fund those gap years and that risk assessment. So yeah, we can bring it up to change again, or you can leave it more general. I don't have preferences.
We have a balance in capital reserve now. And one of my primary motivations here is the focus needs to be on debt service. I think we need to really start putting a focus on debt service and take the gray water out of it, if you will. And my reason being, I don't know that 200 million is going to be enough.
Yeah, the only other change to that was we did put the revenue also.
Mm-hmm.
Before it was just the dollar value. We now added the tax revenue that supports the 1%. That was another change. Because the old resolution didn't indicate directly that the revenue went with it. It was just the dollar.
I'm sorry, I just reread this. This is right. It does still say make a minimum reoccurring annual transfer
Equal to.
equal to 1%, or, yeah.
It's the board's preference. I mean, I think we can work within both structures.
Yeah, you know, I think again, with what John and I presented tonight, the important part of the debt service for me is getting a reoccurring line item expenditure in the operating budget, because having a balance in that fund is going to offset something down the road, but I need that number to be there every year, annually. So that's probably the more important thing from my perspective.
Debt service.
Not necessarily moving this, not necessarily moving this 1% into debt service versus the capital reserve. It's more getting that reoccurring line item in the operating budget. So that $5.5 million of additional debt service is going to help me. It's going to go into the debt service fund next year because we don't have that debt service. But as we go on the out years, it's going to be used to cover the actual cost, if that makes sense.
I like the flexibility of this current resolution, because you can then, it means we don't necessarily need to talk about this every year, right? You can just handle it the way that you see fit, and we trust you with that, and you're still going to present to us, so.
Correct. I mean, basically, we would go through the same process we do now after the end of the fiscal, or even maybe before. We would come to the board and say, okay, based on where we see the fund balances are, we need money to move here. You're going to have the authority to approve it, because we can't do it without your authority. And you also have the authority to do more than what this is saying. This is just guaranteeing we're doing the minimum. Yeah.
Again, I'll say my final comment. Again, part of my rationale is it's a little more incentive for the administration. If you want debt service, save it somewhere else.
Yeah.
That's just my rationale. Okay, 8.01.
So I'm just going to clarify, am I moving this forward then?
Well, we
701?
need to change that minimum part.
It
right?
is actually in there. I reread it. It says to make
Minimum
a
or equal
minimum reoccurring annual transfer equal to 1%. So that to me says we have the ability to do more. Yeah. Thank
you. 8.01, policy, second reading of policy 815.2. Administration, any comments?
Nope.
Board, question, comments? Privilege of the floor. Some of us have to go to work tomorrow. Mrs. Jordan. You should.
Good evening. Thank you, Mike, about the tariffs, because I've been agonizing over them personally. And maybe tomorrow I'll wake up and One gentleman in DC will say 0 tariffs, and one will continue to say 104% tariffs, because everything in this room is going to go up in price if we stay at these high tariffs. And I hope we don't, for everybody's sake in this room. I'm glad the project is going to keep going. I had anxiety about that because I know costs are going to go up. I'm going to still read what I sent to you so the public can hear it. And tonight, Superintendent Bigger, you said social worker. And I know AP Sociology is a social worker. About a week ago, I sent you an email requesting you reconsider your vote on AP Sociology. And tonight, with Mrs. Launschlager's teacher pipeline, that segues really nice into you reconsidering it. 6 of you voted no to the course. Under reconsideration of Robert's Rules of Order, you can rethink your votes. Why do I want you to rethink your votes? In fact, several of the because the Gifted and Talented program saw no increase in its budget for fiscal year 24-25. In fact, several of the administrators' budgets saw no increases, including yours, Superintendent Bigger. Talent is talent and should be fostered here without too many questions asked. Then there is the serious matter to bring to your attention, which is the tariffs. Suddenly and without warning, all our lives in this room were upended. We are faced with at least a 30% increase of products and goods, but I'm not so sure it's 30% anymore. You have several school construction projects you have already undertaken, and I'm glad you're going to undertake them. Please don't stop, and I know you won't stop. Move forward with them. I know you're going to move forward with them. Why? Because children deserve nice surroundings, even when they may not be faced with nice surroundings at home. Children notice a new floor mat, and someone told me that, when it is replaced. Children notice a lot. Mrs. Jordan notices a lot. Mrs. Jordan also likes nice surroundings. And I have one more comment.
Wrap it up, Mrs. Jordan.
I am.
It's 10 o'clock and the board has work to do yet. Okay.
What good is...
Item 11.01 is
what-
for information only.
Okay.
There's a district enrollment
What-
summary out for any
excuse
board
me.
member. Your 3 minutes are up, Mrs. Jordan. 11.02, calendar form, questions and answers are an information item. And now I would like to go to item 12, new business discussion for any board members. Any new business this evening? Okay. We'll go to it. Yes, ma'am. Okay, you got it.
Erin Atherton. My comment is just brief. You said about 30 to 50 years for a new building.
I don't think it's on.
I turned it off, I'm sorry.
For those who are listening on, online.
Okay. You said about 30 to 50 years for a new building.
Depends on which way you go, yeah.
Why are we only looking to increase the size at Cam South if that's where you're building new? 300 students then. How is that looking at 30 to 50 years for that building to be in use for, with only increasing its size 300 students?
Thank you. No, thank you for your comment. I'm glad I looked up. My apologies. New business discussion. Any board members? I have one item here, but you all go first. Real quick one. I just have a note to read from Bev. Remember that the communication workshop is Monday, April 28th, 6 p.m. So mark it on your calendars, please. With that, meeting adjourned. Thank you.